How does a shepherd boy who ended a giant become the most legendary king in biblical history? Today we're covering the complete, unfiltered story of King David, from his humble beginnings tending sheep in Bethlehem to establishing a dynasty that would echo through millennia. But here's what most people don't know. David's path to the throne was bloodier, more complex, and far more dramatic than Sunday school ever taught you. We're talking about political intrigue, family betrayal, military genius, and moral failures that nearly destroyed everything he built. But before we dive in, if you're new to this channel, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Your support means we can continue providing content like this to help you learn more about Scripture, to connect deeper with God. Also, let us know where you're watching from and what time it is. We'd love to hear from you. So without further ado, let's begin, shall we? The Anointed Shepherd. The hill country south of Jerusalem stands quiet under an ancient sky. Sheep graze on rocky slopes. A boy named David watches them, staff in hand, eyes scanning for wolves. He doesn't know that everything is about to change. Far to the north, in the halls of Gibeah, King Saul sits on his throne, the first king of Israel. The man the people demanded when they grew tired of judges and prophets. They wanted to be like other nations. They wanted a king who stood tall, who looked the part, who commanded respect through sheer physical presence. They got exactly what they asked for. Saul towers over other men. His shoulders are broad, his bearing is royal, but something has fractured inside him. The Spirit of God has departed. Where divine guidance once dwelt, something darker has taken root. The king who began with such promise now spirals into paranoia and disobedience. The prophet Samuel grieves. He anointed Saul. He watched the shepherd boy from Benjamin become Israel's first monarch. Now he must watch that same king unravel. God speaks to Samuel in the night. The message is clear. Saul has been rejected. A new king must be chosen. But this time the selection process will be different. Samuel travels to Bethlehem, to the house of Jesse. The town elders tremble when they see him. Prophets don't make casual visits. Samuel tells them to prepare a sacrifice, to gather Jesse's household. He knows one of Jesse's sons will be anointed, but he doesn't know which one. The sons parade before him. Eliab arrives first. He's tall, strong, impressive, everything a king should look like. Samuel feels certainty rising in his chest. This must be the one. The pattern feels familiar. Another tall, commanding figure, another king in the mold of Saul. God's voice cuts through his assumption. Do not consider his appearance or his height. I have rejected him. The words reshape everything Samuel thought he understood about kingship. Human eyes see the surface. They measure height, assess strength, catalog visible qualities. But divine vision penetrates deeper. It sees the interior landscape of a person, the hidden terrain of the heart. Son after son comes forward, each one impressive in his own way. Each one rejected. 7 sons pass before Samuel. 7 times God says no. Samuel turns to Jesse. Are these all your sons? Jesse hesitates. There's one more, the youngest, David. He's out tending the sheep, too young to be considered, too insignificant to be summoned for such an important occasion. Samuel waits. The sacrifice waits. The entire household waits. Send for him. David arrives from the fields, ruddy-faced, bright-eyed, still carrying the smell of sheep in open air. He doesn't look like a king. He looks like exactly what he is, a shepherd boy. God speaks. Rise and anoint him. This is the one. The oil runs down David's head. The Spirit of God rushes upon him from that day forward. But nothing else changes immediately. No crown materializes. No throne appears. David returns to the fields. The sheep still need tending. The anointing creates a strange paradox. David becomes king in God's eyes while remaining invisible to human ones. Saul still sits in Gibeah, still wears the crown, still commands armies. David stands in a field, staff in hand, watching sheep graze. But the current has shifted beneath the surface. Israel exists in a spiritual crisis. The monarchy was meant to be different from other nations. Israel's king was supposed to rule under God's authority, not in place of it. Saul demonstrated what happens when a king trusts his own judgment over divine instruction. He kept spoils of war he was commanded to destroy. He made unauthorized sacrifices. He let fear of the people override fear of God. Each act of disobedience carved away another piece of his legitimacy. The people wanted security. They wanted military strength. They wanted a king who could unite the 12 tribes and stand against the Philistines to the west, the Ammonites to the east, the Amalekites to the south. Saul gave them victories, but at the cost of his relationship with God. Now two kings exist simultaneously, one visible, one hidden, one failing, one preparing. David knows nothing of palace politics or military strategy. His education comes from solitude and danger. When lions threaten the flock, he fights them. When bears attack, he strikes them down. The wilderness teaches him things no royal academy could provide. He learns to trust God in moments of immediate physical danger. He learns that protection doesn't always come through superior numbers or better weapons. Sometimes it comes through faith that allows a young man to face a predator with nothing but a staff and confidence in divine assistance. The sheep become his responsibility, his charge, his kingdom in miniature. A good shepherd doesn't abandon the flock when danger approaches. A good shepherd stands between the threat and the vulnerable. David internalizes this principle. He doesn't yet know how it will define his future reign. In quiet moments, he composes songs. Poetry flows from him naturally like water from a spring. The hills and valleys become his audience. The stars witness his worship. He sings of God's protection, of green pastures and still waters, of walking through dark valleys without fear. The psalms born in these fields will outlast empires. Samuel keeps the anointing secret. Saul cannot know. To reveal it now would mean David's immediate elimination. The current king doesn't handle threats well. He's already demonstrated his willingness to act rashly, to lash out at perceived enemies. David remains in Bethlehem unknown, unrecognized, waiting for a future he can barely imagine. The oil has marked him, the Spirit has filled him, but the throne remains distant, blocked by a king who refuses to let go, who cannot see that his time has already ended. The separation between divine selection and human recognition creates a tension that will define the next decade of David's life. He is chosen, but not crowned. Anointed, but not acknowledged. King in the eyes of heaven, but shepherd in the eyes of earth. This gap between calling and fulfillment becomes the crucible where character forms. David learns to wait. He learns that God's timing doesn't match human impatience. He learns that preparation happens in obscurity, far from the spotlight, in places where only God watches. The fields of Bethlehem seem unremarkable. Nothing about them suggests they're a training ground for royalty. But kingdoms aren't built in palaces, they're built in the hidden places, in the daily choices no one sees, in the faithfulness practiced when no witnesses are present. David tends his sheep, he practices his sling, he writes his songs, he grows stronger, wiser, more capable, and he waits. The oil has marked him. But the path from anointing to throne will require more than divine selection. It will require courage, faith, patience, and a heart that truly seeks after God rather than after power. Samuel returns to Ramah. Jesse returns to his daily routine. David returns to the hills. But the future has already been set in motion. The current king sits in Gibeah, tormented by the spirit he lost. The future king stands in a field filled with the spirit he received. Between them stretches a chasm of time, trial, and transformation. The story has begun. Strings and stones. An evil spirit torments Saul. It descends without warning, wrapping around his mind like smoke. The king who once led armies now thrashes in his chambers, unable to find peace. His servants watch helplessly as their monarch unravels. Someone suggests music. A skilled harpist might soothe the troubled spirit. The court searches for someone with the gift. Word reaches them of Jesse's youngest son. The boy plays with uncommon skill, and he's brave, well-spoken, carries himself with unexpected grace. Send for him. David arrives at court carrying his harp. The shepherd boy enters the palace. He sees Saul for the first time. Imposing, broken, dangerous. When the dark spirit descends, David plays. His fingers move across the strings, drawing out melodies learned in solitary fields. The music fills the room. The evil spirit retreats. Saul's breathing slows. The tension drains from his frame. Relief floods the king's face. David becomes a permanent fixture in Saul's household. He serves as armor-bearer when Saul is well, a musician when the spirit attacks. The arrangement works. The shepherd boy who was secretly anointed now stands in the presence of the man he will replace. Neither of them knows it yet. Months pass. David moves between Bethlehem and Gibeah, tending sheep when permitted, serving Saul when summoned. He learns palace life. He observes how power operates. He watches the king's moods shift like weather. Then the Philistines gather for war. They mass in the valley of Elah, their armies spreading across the western slopes. Israel arrays its forces on the opposite ridge. Between them stretches a valley floor where no one dares to tread. Both armies hold their positions, neither willing to charge across open ground into enemy spears. Each morning, a giant emerges from the Philistine ranks. Goliath of Gath stands over 9 feet tall. His armor weighs more than most men can carry. His spear shaft is thick as a weaver's beam. The bronze scales of his armor catch the sun, making him appear more monument than human. He shouts his challenge across the valley. Send one man to fight him. Winner takes all. Loser's nation becomes servants to the victor. Single combat to decide the war. No one from Israel answers. Not on the first day, not on the second, not for 40 days. Fear paralyzes Saul's army. These are experienced warriors who have faced death before, but something about Goliath transcends normal battlefield courage. He represents more than physical danger. He embodies Israel's helplessness against the established powers around them. The Philistines control iron-working technology. They field superior weapons. They train professional soldiers while Israel relies on farmer militias. Goliath becomes the living symbol of that technological and military gap. David arrives at the battlefield carrying food for his brothers. Jesse sent him to check on his older sons, to bring them grain and cheese to ensure they're well. David reaches the camp just as Goliath delivers his morning mockery. The giant's voice rolls across the valley. Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he defeats me, we will be your servants. But if I defeat him, you will serve us. The Israelite lines recoil. Veterans look away. Officers pretend to busy themselves with equipment. David watches this reaction with growing incredulity. He turns to the soldiers near him. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? The question reveals everything about David's perspective. Others see an unbeatable giant. David sees an enemy of God. Others calculate odds and armor thickness. David considers covenant relationship. The same faith that allowed him to face lions in the wilderness now processes military reality through a different lens. Word reaches Saul that someone is asking about the giant, questioning why no one will fight. The king summons this curious soldier. David stands before Saul again, but this time not as a musician. Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul looks at this young man, this shepherd who plays the harp. You're not able to go against this Philistine. You're only a boy, and he's been a warrior from his youth. David's response bypasses military credentials. He tells stories instead, stories of protecting sheep. When a lion came, he struck it down. When a bear attacked, he seized it by its hair and eliminated it. The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. The logic is spiritual, not tactical. Past faithfulness in small things proves God's capacity for present faithfulness in large things. Saul has no better option. 40 days of unanswered challenge have exhausted his alternatives. Go, and the Lord be with you. They try to dress David in Saul's armor. The bronze helmet swallows his head. The coat of mail hangs wrong on his frame. He takes a few steps and realizes he can barely move. This is someone else's equipment, someone else's approach to warfare. David removes it all. He'll face Goliath as himself with weapons he knows. He walks to a stream and selects 5 smooth stones, placing them in his shepherd's bag. He takes his staff and his sling. Then he walks down into the valley. Goliath sees him coming. The giant's reaction mixes contempt and insult. Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks? He curses David by his gods. Come here and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David's reply doesn't match the expected pattern of warrior boasting. He doesn't claim superior skill or strength. You come against me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. The theological premise precedes the physical confrontation. Victory belongs to God, not to weapons. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves. The battle belongs to the Lord. Goliath advances. David runs toward him. The shepherd's hand reaches into his bag, extracts a stone, places it in the sling. The motion is practiced, refined through countless hours protecting sheep from predators. The sling whips through the air. The stone flies true. It strikes Goliath in the forehead, the one unprotected spot where helmet doesn't cover flesh. The giant stumbles. The earth shakes when he falls. David runs forward, stands over the fallen warrior. He has no sword of his own, so he draws Goliath's blade from its sheath and uses it to complete what the stone began. The Philistine army watches their champion fall. Panic ripples through their ranks. They turn and run. Israel's soldiers, paralyzed by fear moments ago, now surge forward with a shout. They pursue the fleeing Philistines all the way to Gath and Ekron. The valley floor that no one dared cross becomes a highway of pursuit. David returns carrying Goliath's head. The victory transforms him from unknown shepherd to national hero instantly. The women of Israel come out singing and dancing. They play tambourines and lyres. Their song echoes through the streets. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. The comparison is innocent, born of enthusiasm and relief, but it lodges in Saul's mind like a splinter. Thousands for Saul, tens of thousands for David. The arithmetic of popularity points toward a future Saul cannot accept. But before the jealousy fully forms, something else happens. Jonathan, Saul's son and heir to the throne, meets David. The connection between them is immediate and profound. Jonathan sees in David everything a leader should be: courage, faith, humility. He makes a covenant with David, loving him as himself. Jonathan removes his own robe and gives it to David, along with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. The gesture carries immense symbolic weight. The crown prince transfers his own royal garments to a shepherd. The heir apparent acknowledges a shepherd's superiority. David gains a friend who will prove more loyal than blood should require. Saul gains a rival he cannot ignore. The valley of Elah becomes a dividing line. Before it, David was a harpist, a shepherd, a pleasant young man who occasionally soothed the king's troubled mind. After it, he becomes a phenomenon, a military asset, a threat. The stone that brought down Goliath also struck something deeper. It demonstrated that God's power doesn't depend on conventional strength, that faith matters more than armor, that a shepherd with a sling and divine backing can accomplish what an entire army cannot. The women keep singing their song, thousands and tens of thousands. The comparison grows louder each time David returns from battle, and Saul begins to listen in a different way, not with gratitude, not with joy at his nation's deliverance, with fear. The price of favor. The songs follow David everywhere. Women line the streets when the army returns. They dance with tambourines, their voices rising in celebration. Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. The same refrain, the same comparison. Each repetition carves deeper into Saul's deteriorating mind. The king watches David return from another successful campaign. The young commander moves through the crowd with natural ease, accepting praise without arrogance, acknowledging his men rather than claiming sole credit. These qualities that should make him admirable instead make him dangerous. Saul recognizes something in David that he has lost in himself: the favor of God, the love of the people, the effortless authority that doesn't require force or fear. David possesses everything Saul once had and has been losing piece by piece. The next day, an evil spirit descends on Saul. David arrives with his harp, ready to play the soothing melodies that have always brought relief. His fingers move across the strings, the music fills the room. Saul grips his spear, the weapon feels solid in his hands. David sits near the wall, focused on his playing, unaware of the shift in the room's atmosphere. Saul's arm draws back. The spear launches. David sees the movement and dodges. The spear embeds itself in the wall behind where his head had been. The music stops. Silence fills the space between them. Saul recovers quickly, masking his intent behind confusion caused by the evil spirit. But David understands. The attempt was real. The king he serves just tried to end his life. The next day, David returns. His duty requires it. The spirit torments Saul again. Again, David plays. Again, a spear flies. Again, David evades. Twice. Saul tried twice to pin David to the wall. The message is clear, but Saul can't acknowledge it openly. He can't simply execute the nation's hero without cause. The people love David too much. The army trusts him too deeply. Saul needs a different approach, something that appears generous but conceals danger. He promotes David to commander of 1,000 men. The move serves multiple purposes. It removes David from close proximity to the king. It places him in combat situations that might solve the problem naturally. It also appears to be a reward, maintaining Saul's public image as David's benefactor. David excels in his new role. Every mission succeeds, every battle ends in victory. His fame grows. The soldiers under his command would follow him anywhere. Even Saul's own household staff begin to admire David more than their king. Saul's daughter Michal falls in love with David. When this reaches the king's ears, he sees opportunity. He offers Michal as a wife, but sets a bride price designed to cause David's demise. Instead of silver or gold, Saul demands proof of 100 Philistine soldiers eliminated in battle. The request is grotesque and tactically insane. No reasonable person would attempt such a feat. Saul expects David to perish in the attempt, allowing the king to mourn a fallen hero rather than execute a rival. David accepts the challenge. He takes his men into Philistine territory. They strike hard and fast. When David returns, he brings evidence of twice the required number, 200 instead of 100. He presents the proof to Saul. The king must now honor his word, must give his daughter to the man he wants destroyed. Michal becomes David's wife. Saul gains a son-in-law he fears more each day. The campaigns continue. David leads Israel's forces against the Philistines repeatedly. Each victory is decisive. Each return is triumphant. The gap between David's rising star and Saul's fading glory becomes impossible to ignore. Saul stops pretending to hide his intentions. He speaks openly to Jonathan and his attendants. His command is direct: eliminate David. Jonathan finds himself torn between father and friend, between duty to the throne and loyalty to the man he made a covenant with. He chooses David. He warns him of Saul's intentions, then approaches his father with careful reasoning. Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you. His actions have benefited you greatly. He took his life in his hands when he struck down the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel. You saw it and were glad. Why would you do wrong to innocent blood? The argument reaches Saul in a moment of clarity. He takes an oath. As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death. Jonathan brings David back to court. The arrangement returns to something resembling normal. David serves the king, leads the army, lives with Michal. The crisis appears resolved. Then the Philistines attack again. David leads the counteroffensive. The victory is overwhelming, driving the enemy forces into full retreat. David returns home to another wave of celebration. The women sing their song, thousands and tens of thousands. Saul sits in his house with his spear in hand. The evil spirit settles on him like a fog. David stands nearby, harp ready, beginning to play. He has done this countless times. He knows the routine. The spear leaves Saul's hand. David moves. The weapon strikes the wall. David doesn't wait for a second attempt. He runs from the house. He makes it home to Michal. Saul's men arrive shortly after, surrounding the house with orders to take David at first light. Michal recognizes the danger immediately. Her father will not stop this time. She helps David escape through a window. He disappears into the night while she places an idol in their bed, covering it to create the illusion of someone sleeping. Morning comes. Saul's men enter the house. Michal claims David is ill. The deception buys hours. When they finally discover the truth and report back to Saul, David has vanished. He runs to Ramah, to Samuel. The old prophet who anointed him years ago becomes his refuge. But even there, safety is temporary. Saul learns David's location. He sends men to capture him. Those men arrive and encounter Samuel leading a group of prophets in worship. The Spirit of God falls on Saul's soldiers. Instead of arresting David, they begin to prophesy. Saul sends more men. The same thing happens. Then a third group. Again, prophecy instead of capture. Finally, Saul goes himself. The Spirit of God falls on him too. He strips off his robes and prophesies before Samuel, lying that way all day and night. The scene is both sacred and absurd. The king who rejected God's word, now compelled to speak prophetically, while the man he hunts escapes. David uses the time to reach Jonathan. They meet in secret. David's question is desperate. What have I done? What is my crime? How have I wronged your father that he seeks my life? Jonathan struggles to accept the reality. My father doesn't do anything without telling me. Why would he hide this from me? David's response is gentle but firm. Your father knows about our friendship. He's hiding his plans to spare you pain. They devise a test. A feast is approaching, one David is expected to attend. He will hide instead. If Saul reacts with anger at David's absence, his intentions are murderous. Jonathan will signal the result through a predetermined code involving arrows and a servant boy. The feast arrives. David's seat remains empty. Saul notices but says nothing the first day. The second day, Saul turns to Jonathan. "Where is Jesse's son? Why hasn't he come to the meal?" Jonathan delivers the prepared excuse. David requested permission to attend a family sacrifice in Bethlehem. Saul's rage explodes. He turns on his own son. "You son of a perverse and rebellious woman, don't I know that you have sided with Jesse's son to your own shame? As long as he lives, neither you nor your kingdom will be established. Now send for him and bring him to me, for he must be eliminated." Jonathan challenges his father. Why should he be put to death? What has he done? Saul hurls his spear at his own son. Jonathan dodges and leaves the table, burning with anger, not for himself, for David. The next morning, Jonathan goes to the field with his bow and a young servant. He shoots arrows. The signals are given. The servant returns to the city. Jonathan and David emerge from hiding. They stand facing each other, the crown prince and the anointed shepherd. Friends bound by covenant, but separated by circumstances beyond their control. Jonathan knows what this separation means. He will likely never see David again. His father has made the choice clear. They embrace. Both weep. Jonathan speaks final words, "Go in peace, for we have sworn friendship with each other in the name of the Lord. The Lord is witness between you and me, and between your descendants and my descendants forever." David turns and leaves. He walks away from the court, from stability, from everything he has built since the day he faced Goliath. He becomes a fugitive, a man without home or safety, the hero of Israel now hunted by the king of Israel. Jonathan returns to the city. He returns to his father's. He returns to his position as heir to a throne that is already promised to someone else. The friendship survives, the covenant holds, but the men walk separate paths into an uncertain future. David moves into the wilderness. Behind him lies the palace, the victories, the songs of celebration. Ahead lies survival. The price of God's favor has come due. The anointed king must now learn what it means to trust divine promises when everything visible suggests those promises have failed. The fugitive and the holy bread. David runs. No destination, no plan. Just the immediate need to put distance between himself and Saul's spear. The shepherd boy who became a giant slayer, who married a princess, who commanded armies, now walks alone on dusty roads with nothing but the clothes on his back. He reaches Nob, a small priestly town just north of Jerusalem. The tabernacle rests here. Ahimelech the priest serves at this sacred site. When he sees David approaching alone, alarm crosses his face. Why would Saul's son-in-law and commander arrive without an escort, without attendants, without the trappings of his position? David lies. The dishonesty tastes bitter, but survival requires it. He claims to be on a secret mission for the king. His men are supposed to meet him at a designated place. The deception works. Ahimelech's suspicion eases. "What do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find." Ahimelech checks his supplies. Only consecrated bread is available. The bread of the presence, holy loaves meant exclusively for priests. Ahimelech hesitates, then makes a decision. The ceremonial law serves human need, not the other way around. If David and his men have kept themselves ceremonially clean, they can eat. David assures him they have. He takes the bread. "Do you have a spear or sword here?" "I haven't brought my sword or any weapon because the king's mission was urgent." Ahimelech's expression brightens. "The sword of Goliath the Philistine, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, is here. It's wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it." The irony is almost painful. David fled so quickly he left without weapons. Now he arms himself with the sword of his most famous victory. The blade that once belonged to Israel's greatest enemy becomes the fugitive's only defense. What David doesn't notice is another man in the shadows. Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd, happens to be detained at the tabernacle that day for religious purification. He sees everything. He hears everything. He files it away. David continues south, sword in hand, bread in his pack. But where can he go? Israel is not safe. Saul's reach extends everywhere. David makes a desperate calculation. He heads west toward Philistine territory, toward Gath, Goliath's home city. The logic is insane. This is the place where David became famous. This is the city whose champion he eliminated. His arrival there is recognized immediately. Isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about? Saul has struck down his thousands and David his tens of thousands. The words terrify David. He's alone in enemy territory, identified as Israel's greatest warrior. The Philistines could easily settle accounts for Goliath. He needs an escape strategy, something to make them dismiss him as non-threatening. He chooses madness. David begins to act insane. He scratches marks on the doors of the city gate. He lets saliva run down his beard. He stumbles and mutters incoherently. The performance is degrading but effective. Achish, king of Gath, watches this display with disgust. Look at the man. He's insane. Why bring him to me? Do I lack madmen that you bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house? They throw David out. The deception works. They want nothing to do with what appears to be a deranged vagrant. David escapes into the wilderness, his dignity shattered but his life intact. He finds refuge in a cave at Adullam, in the hill country between Philistine territory and Judah. For a moment, he's alone with his thoughts, with the aftermath of how far he has fallen, from palace to cave, from commander to fugitive, from celebration to survival. Then others begin to arrive. His brothers come. His father's entire household makes the journey. Then others, men in distress, men in debt, men who are discontented, men who have been squeezed by Saul's increasingly paranoid rule, men who have nowhere else to go. 400 men gather around David in the cave. Not soldiers, not trained warriors, desperate men, outcasts, debtors, the broken pieces of Israelite society that no longer fit anywhere else. David becomes their leader by default. He didn't seek followers, he was running for his own life. But something about him draws the marginalized and dispossessed. They see in him a possibility, an alternative to Saul's unstable reign. David faces a choice. He could dismiss them, continue running alone, or he could shape this collection of broken men into something useful. He chooses the latter. But first, he must secure his family's safety. Saul might target them to draw David out. He travels to Moab, to the east across the Jordan. He approaches the king of Moab with a request. Please let my father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me. The Moabite king agrees. David's family finds refuge in enemy territory, safer there than in their own land. The arrangement is temporary but necessary. A prophet named Gad finds David. The message is direct. Don't stay in the stronghold. Return to Judah. David obeys. He and his men move to the forest of Hereth, remaining mobile, staying ahead of Saul's forces. Meanwhile, back in Gibeah, Saul sits under a tamarisk tree with his spear in hand, surrounded by his officials. Paranoia consumes him completely now. He addresses his servants with bitter accusations. Listen, men of Benjamin. Will Jesse's son give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with Jesse's son. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie in wait for me as he does today. Doeg, the Edomite, steps forward. He has been waiting for this moment. I saw Jesse's son come to Ahimelech at Nob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. The information ignites Saul's fury. He sends for Ahimelech and all the priests of Nob. They arrive, confused and afraid. Saul's accusation is immediate. Why have you conspired against me, you and Jesse's son? You gave him bread and a sword and inquired of God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me. Ahimelech's defense is honest and dignified. Who of all your servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? Was that day the first time I inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant or any of his father's family, for your servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair. The defense is reasonable. The facts are accurate. Ahimelech served David in good faith, believing him to be on the king's business. But reason no longer reaches Saul. You will surely be eliminated, Ahimelech, you and your whole family. Saul orders his guards to strike down the priests. The guards refuse. They will not lift their hands against the Lord's anointed servants. These are men who have served loyally, but even their loyalty has limits. Saul turns to Doeg. You turn and strike down the priests. Doeg obeys. He moves through the priests systematically. 85 men wearing linen ephods fall that day. Then Doeg goes to Nob itself. He puts the entire town to the sword, men, women, children, infants, even the livestock. The priestly city is erased. One man escapes. Abiathar, son of Ahimelech, flees to David carrying the ephod. He arrives with devastating news. The massacre at Nob is the elimination of the priests, the destruction of the town. David's response is immediate and anguished. That day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be certain to tell Saul, I am responsible for the lives of your whole family. Stay with me. Don't be afraid. The man who wants to take your life is trying to take mine also. You will be safe with me. The weight of unintended consequences crushes down. David's lie to save his own life led to the massacre of innocent priests. His deception, born of desperation, resulted in 85 deaths. The bread he ate cost far more than he imagined. Abiathar joins David's band. The escaped priest becomes a permanent part of the fugitive company. He brings the ephod with him, the sacred garment that allows inquiry of the Lord. David's group grows. 400 desperate men, an escaped priest, a prophet who brings God's messages. So they move through the wilderness of Judah, staying ahead of Saul's forces, surviving on whatever they can find or acquire. The outlaw company begins to function as an alternative power center. David still possesses nothing officially. No territory, no throne, no formal authority. But he has what matters more: loyalty from men who have nowhere else to go, divine guidance through the priest's ephod, and the anointing oil that still marks him as God's chosen. The cave at Adullam becomes legendary, the place where the broken gathered around a broken king, the place where desperation forged a fellowship that would outlast the current regime. David learns to lead men who have no reason to follow except belief in him personally. He learns to make decisions with eternal weight. He learns that even survival carries moral cost. The holy bread sustained his body, but it purchased his conscience with the blood of innocent priests. The sword of Goliath arms his hand, but it reminds him daily that past victories don't guarantee present safety. The cave shelters his body, but it reveals truths about leadership that palaces obscure. David the fugitive begins the education that David the king will need. Out here in the wilderness with outcasts and debtors, he learns what Saul never did: how to lead with nothing but character and faith. The shadow of a king, word reaches David's camp. The Philistines are attacking Keilah, a fortified town in Judah. They're raiding threshing floors, stealing grain that communities depend on for survival. The town's defenders are overwhelmed. David's men huddle around him in their wilderness hideout. They're fugitives, outlaws, men barely keeping themselves fed and safe. The logical response is to ignore Keilah's crisis. Getting involved means exposing their position, risking combat with a superior force. David inquires of the Lord through Abiathar's ephod. The answer comes back: go, attack the Philistines, and save Keilah. His men push back immediately. We're afraid here in Judah. How much more if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces? Their fear is reasonable. They're already hunted by their own king. Now David wants to engage foreign invaders? The risk seems absurd. David inquires again. The Lord's response is unchanged and specific. Go down to Keilah, for I am going to give the Philistines into your hand. David leads his men to battle. They strike the Philistines with devastating force, driving them off, rescuing the livestock, inflicting heavy casualties. Keilah is saved. The townspeople are grateful. David and his men settle in, taking shelter behind the town's walls. News of David's location reaches Saul. The king's response is immediate and revealing. God has delivered him into my hands, for David has imprisoned himself by entering a town with gates and bars. Saul calls up his forces. An entire army mobilizes to capture one man and his small band. The scale of the response demonstrates how thoroughly David occupies Saul's mind. David learns of the approaching army. He calls for Abiathar and the ephod. The questions he asks reveal his strategic thinking. Lord, God of Israel, your servant has heard that Saul plans to come to Keilah and destroy the town on account of me. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me to him? Will Saul come down, as your servant has heard? The answer: he will come down. Will the citizens of Keilah surrender me and my men to Saul? The answer: they will. The town David just saved will betray him. Gratitude dissolves under self-preservation. If Saul besieges Keilah, the citizens will hand David over rather than face destruction. The divine warning allows David to escape what would otherwise be a fatal trap. He and his men leave Keilah immediately. They number about 600 now, grown from the original 400. They move constantly, staying in the wilderness, in the hill country of Ziph. Saul searches daily. God does not give David into his hands. Jonathan finds David in the desert of Ziph. The crown prince slips away from his father's court, locates his friend in hiding, and delivers words that demonstrate extraordinary faith and humility. Don't be afraid. My father Saul will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father Saul knows this. Think about what Jonathan is saying. He's the legal heir to the throne, the eldest son of the reigning king. Everything in the natural order suggests the crown passes to him. Instead, he acknowledges David's coming kingship and pledges to serve under him. The two men make a covenant before the Lord. Then Jonathan returns home. He returns to the court of a father who is hunting his best friend. He returns to a position that should be his destiny, but that he has surrendered to someone else. The Ziphites betray David's location to Saul. They send word, David is hiding among us in the strongholds at Horesh, on the hill of Hakilah, south of Jeshimon. Saul thanks them. The Lord bless you for your concern for me. Go and get more information. Find out where David usually goes and who has seen him there. Come back to me with definite information, and I will go with you. If he is in the area, I will track him down on all the clans of Judah. The manhunt intensifies. Saul's forces move south. David shifts position, escaping to the desert of Maon. Saul follows. The armies move on opposite sides of a mountain. David and his men flee desperately, trying to stay ahead of Saul's encircling forces. Then a messenger reaches Saul with urgent news. Come quickly, the Philistines are raiding the land. Saul breaks off pursuit. The external threat takes precedence over the internal one. He withdraws to deal with the Philistine incursion. David escapes by the narrowest margin imaginable. David relocates to En-Gedi, strongholds near the Dead Sea. Caves honeycomb the cliffs, providing shelter and defensive positions. When Saul returns from fighting the Philistines, someone informs him of David's new location. Saul takes 3,000 chosen men, the best soldiers in Israel, and goes hunting. The disproportion is staggering. 3,000 elite troops against 600 fugitives. The pursuit brings Saul to the very cave where David and his men are hiding deep in its recesses. Saul enters alone, seeking privacy for natural needs. He doesn't know the cave is occupied. David's men whisper urgently, "This is the day the Lord spoke of when he said, 'I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish.'" David creeps forward silently. Saul is completely vulnerable, unaware, unarmed. One thrust would end everything. The persecution would stop, the throne would open, divine promise would align with human action. David's hand moves, but instead of striking Saul, he cuts off a corner of the king's robe. Just the fabric, a symbolic gesture rather than a lethal one. Even this minor act troubles David immediately. His conscience burns. The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him. He is the anointed of the Lord. He rebukes his men, preventing them from attacking Saul. The king finishes his business and leaves the cave, completely unaware of how close he came to elimination. David waits, then emerges from the cave. He calls after Saul, "My lord the king?" Saul turns. David bows down, face to the ground, demonstrating respect despite everything. Then he speaks. "Why do you listen when men say, 'David is bent on harming you'? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave. Some urged me to eliminate you, but I spared you. I said, I will not lay my hand on my Lord, because he is the Lord's anointed." David holds up the piece of robe. "See, my father, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but did not harm you. See that there is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me down to take my life." The evidence is irrefutable. David had opportunity and chose mercy. Saul stands exposed, not by his enemy's sword, but by his enemy's grace. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord avenge the wrongs you have done to me, but my hand will not touch you. As the old saying goes, from evildoers come evil deeds, so my hand will not touch you. Saul's response breaks through his hardened exterior. He begins to weep. "You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just told me about the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not harm me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today." Then comes admission that costs Saul everything. "I know that you will surely be king and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands." Saul knows, he has known for some time. His persecution isn't about genuine threat. It's about refusing to surrender what God has already taken. It's about clinging to power that no longer belongs to him. He extracts one promise from David: "Swear to me by the Lord that you will not eliminate my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family." David swears the oath. Saul returns home. David and his men return to the stronghold. The encounter changes nothing about the fundamental situation. Saul's admission doesn't translate into lasting policy. His moments of clarity are temporary breaks in the paranoia that defines him. Shortly after, Samuel dies. All Israel assembles to mourn. The prophet who anointed both Saul and David, who witnessed the transition between old and new, passes from the scene. His death removes one of the few remaining stabilizing influences. David moves to the desert of Paran. His men need provisions. There's a wealthy man named Nabal whose property is nearby, a man with 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. His wife Abigail is intelligent and beautiful. Nabal himself is surly and mean in his dealings. David's men have been in the area during sheep shearing season. They protected Nabal's shepherds from bandits, never taking anything that wasn't theirs. David sends messengers to Nabal with a polite request for food. "Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them." Nabal's response drips with contempt. "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?" The insult is calculated. Nabal knows exactly who David is. Calling him son of Jesse diminishes him. Comparing him to runaway slaves compounds the offense. Refusing basic hospitality violates fundamental cultural norms. David's reaction is immediate and violent. "Put on your swords." 400 men arm themselves. David leaves 200 behind to guard supplies and leads a strike force toward Nabal's property. His internal monologue is dark. "It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David severely if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him." One of Nabal's servants reaches Abigail with urgent news. He explains how David's men protected them in the wilderness, how they were never mistreated, how Nabal hurled insults at David's messengers. "Now disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him." Abigail acts immediately. Without telling Nabal, she loads donkeys with wine, dressed sheep, roasted grain, raisin cakes, fig cakes. She rides out to intercept David. She finds him coming down a ravine with his armed men. She dismounts quickly, bows low before David. Her words are carefully chosen, taking blame on herself, asking David to overlook her husband's foolishness. "Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him." Then she makes her crucial argument. She doesn't appeal to mercy for Nabal. She appeals to David's future. "Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. When the Lord has fulfilled every good thing he promised concerning my lord, and has appointed you ruler over Israel, my lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself." She sees the trajectory. She understands that David is marked for kingship. She's asking him to protect his future self from his present rage. Avenging an insult through mass slaughter would stain a reputation built on trusting God rather than taking personal vengeance. David's response shows how close he came to disaster. "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed this day and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. He accepts her gifts and sends her home in peace. The crisis is averted. David's better nature prevails, but only because Abigail intervened at exactly the right moment. Abigail returns to find Nabal hosting a feast like a king's, drunk and celebrating. She waits until morning to tell him what happened. When she explains how close he came to annihilation, his heart fails. 10 days later, he dies. David hears the news. His response reveals his perspective on the entire episode. Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Then David sends word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. She accepts immediately. The episodes at Engedi and with Nabal establish patterns that will define David's reign. He possesses the capacity for both mercy and rage. He can spare Saul in a cave and plan to massacre Nabal's household. He can trust God's justice and nearly take vengeance into his own hands. The difference often comes down to who reaches him first. Jonathan reminds him of God's promise. Abigail prevents bloodshed through wise intervention. David's heart pulls him in different directions. Without guidance, without restraint, his passions could destroy him. But in these wilderness years, he's building something. A reputation for mercy even toward enemies, a capacity to be reasoned with, a willingness to trust divine timing rather than force his way to the throne. Every time he spares Saul, every time he restrains his hand, every time he waits instead of acts, he proves himself worthy of what's been promised. The shadow of a king falls across the wilderness, not yet crowned, not yet acknowledged, but unmistakably present. A covenant in the wilderness. The wilderness teaches patience. David and his 600 men move through Judah's southern regions, staying mobile, surviving on what supporters provide or what they can acquire. Meanwhile, Saul continues his pursuit, though with decreasing effectiveness. The Ziphites betray David's position again. Is not David hiding on the hill of Hakilah, which faces Jeshimon? Saul mobilizes 3,000 chosen troops. He camps on the hill of Hakilah, his forces arranged in a standard military encampment. David's scouts bring word of Saul's exact position. David makes a bold decision. He takes 2 men, Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai son of Zeruiah, and infiltrates Saul's camp at night. They creep past sleeping soldiers, past sentries who should be alert but have been supernaturally induced to deep sleep. They reach the center of the camp. Saul lies sleeping, his spear stuck in the ground near his head. Abner, the commander of the army, sleeps nearby along with the troops surrounding them. Abishai whispers urgently, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice." One thrust. Clean, simple, decisive. The man hunting David would be gone. The throne would open. Years of running would end. David's response is immediate. Don't harm him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come and he will perish, or he will go into battle and be swept away. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Second time. Second opportunity. Second refusal. The pattern is deliberate. David will not take the throne by force. He will not shortcut divine timing. He will not raise his hand against God's anointed, even when that anointed has forfeited his right to rule. Now get the spear and water jug that are near his head and let's go. They take the items and leave. No one wakes. No one sees them. They cross to the opposite hillside and stop at a safe distance. Then David begins to shout, "Aren't you going to answer me, Abner?" Abner wakes, disoriented. "Who are you who calls to the king?" David's mockery is pointed. "You're a man, aren't you? And who is like you in Israel? Why didn't you guard your lord the king? Someone came to harm your lord the king. What you have done is not good. As surely as the Lord lives, you and your men must perish, because you did not guard your master, the Lord's anointed. Look around you. Where are the king's spear and water jug that were near his head?" Saul recognizes David's voice. "Is that your voice, David, my son?" The exchange that follows echoes their previous encounter, but with added poignancy. "It is my voice, my lord the king. Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. David's theology is visible here. Either God is testing him through Saul's persecution, or human malice is driving Saul's actions. Either way, David refuses to take matters into his own hands. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance and have said, "Go, serve other gods. Now do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord." The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts a partridge in the mountains. The imagery is devastating. Israel's king, with 3,000 troops, hunting one man like a flea or a small bird. The disproportion reveals the absurdity of the entire pursuit. Saul's admission comes again. I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. I have acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. David returns the spear. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. The Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. They separate. Saul returns home. David continues on. But this time, David's calculation has shifted. Saul's remorse is genuine in the moment, but temporary in duration. The cycle will repeat. More pursuit, more danger, more narrow escapes. David makes a painful decision. One of these days, I will be swept away by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand. He crosses into Philistine territory with his 600 men and their families. He goes to Achish, king of Gath, the same ruler before whom David once feigned madness. But circumstances have changed. David now commands a significant fighting force. He's no longer a solo fugitive, but a military asset. Achish welcomes him. David's presence actually serves Philistine interests. It drives a wedge between David and Saul, potentially weakening Israel's military capacity. David requests a specific arrangement. If I have found favor in your eyes, let a place be assigned to me in one of the country towns, that I may live there. Why should your servant live in the royal city with you? Achish grants him Ziklag, a town in the southern region. David settles there with his men and their families. The location is strategic, far from Achish's direct supervision, but positioned to conduct raids. David begins a double game. He raids the Geshurites, the Girzites, and the Amalekites. These are traditional enemies of Israel, but they're also allies or neighbors of the Philistines. David strikes them ruthlessly, leaving no survivors who could report back to Achish about his true targets. When Achish asks where David has raided, David replies vaguely, against the Negev of Judah, or other regions that would make Achish think David is attacking his own people. The deception works. Achish believes David is burning bridges with Israel, making himself permanently dependent on Philistine protection. He has become so obnoxious to his people, the Israelites, that he will be my servant for life. David lives in Philistine territory for a year and 4 months. The irony is multi-layered. The future king of Israel serves Israel's enemy. The giant slayer works for the people whose champion he famously defeated. The man chosen by God exists in a liminal space, neither fully Israelite nor fully Philistine, trusted by neither, yet useful to both. During this time, David's relationship with Jonathan exists in suspended animation. The crown prince remains in Saul's court. David lives in Philistine territory. The physical distance mirrors the impossible position both men occupy. Jonathan's loyalty to David never wavers. His covenant remains intact. But practical reality creates separation. They cannot meet. They cannot communicate openly. The friendship that once sustained both of them now exists primarily as memory and promise. Jonathan knows David will be king. He has said so explicitly. His father knows it too, though Saul refuses to accept it. The entire court understands the trajectory, but Jonathan's position becomes increasingly untenable. He's heir to a throne that belongs to someone else. He's son to a father who is hunting his best friend. He's bound by blood to Saul and by covenant to David. The tension cannot be resolved through any action Jonathan might take. He can only remain faithful to the covenant and wait for events to unfold according to divine timing. David's wilderness years are ending, but not in the way anyone expected. He's not returning to Saul's court. He's not openly rebelling. He's not claiming the throne by force. Instead, he's positioned himself in a precarious middle space. Servant to the Philistines, but loyal to Israel. Trusted by Achish, but faithful to God's promise. Separated from Jonathan, but bound by covenant. The arrangement is unstable. It cannot last indefinitely. Forces are moving that will bring everything to a crisis point. But for now, David survives. He protects his men. He maintains his integrity in impossible circumstances. He waits for God to move, even when waiting requires serving the enemy, living in exile and existing in moral ambiguity that would break lesser men. The covenant made in the wilderness between David and Jonathan represents more than friendship. It represents a recognition that God's purposes transcend human structures of power and succession. Jonathan surrenders his rightful claim because he recognizes a greater claim. David honors Saul despite persecution because he recognizes divine anointing above personal grievance. Both men subordinate their immediate interests to a larger story they can only partially see. The wilderness years refine David. The fugitive life strips away everything except character and faith. The years serving the Philistines teach him about his enemies while protecting him from his king. When David finally takes the throne, he will not do so as an untested youth who slew a giant. He will do so as a man forged in adversity, tested by power's temptation, proven through restraint. The wilderness is preparation. The covenant is foundation. The waiting is education. And the time is coming when all three will bear fruit that transforms a nation. The fall of the house of Saul. The Philistines gather their forces at Aphek. 5 regional lords unite their armies for a coordinated assault on Israel. This is not a border skirmish or localized raid. This is total war, the largest military mobilization the Philistines have attempted in years. Achish includes David and his men in the Philistine forces. David marches with the army that intends to destroy his own people. The moral complexity is suffocating. To refuse would mean exposure and likely elimination. To participate would mean fighting against Israel. The Philistine commanders review their troops. They see the Israelite contingent marching in the rear guard with Achish. Their reaction is immediate and hostile. What about these Hebrews? Achish defends David. Is this not David who was an officer of Saul, king of Israel? He has already been with me for over a year, and from the day he left Saul until now I have found no fault in him. The commanders refuse. Send the man back. He must return to the place you assigned him. He must not go with us into battle, or he will turn against us during the fighting. How better could he regain his master's favor than by taking the heads of our own men? Isn't this the David they sang about in their dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, and David his tens of thousands. Achish calls David. His tone is apologetic but firm. As surely as the Lord lives, you have been reliable, and I would be pleased to have you serve with me in the army. From the day you came to me until today, I have found no fault in you. But the rulers don't approve of you. Now turn back and go in peace. Do nothing to displease the Philistine rulers. David's response demonstrates his impossible position. But what have I done? What have you found against your servant from the day I came to you until now? Why can't I go and fight against the enemies of my lord the king? The protest is necessary theater. To appear too eager to leave would confirm Philistine suspicions. But David must be grateful for this intervention. God has extracted him from an impossible situation. He doesn't have to fight Israel. He doesn't have to reveal his true loyalties. He can return to Ziklag with his honor intact in Philistine eyes. David and his men leave early the next morning, heading back south. The Philistine armies march north toward their confrontation with Saul. 3 days later, David reaches Ziklag. Horror greets him. The town has been burned. The Amalekites raided during the men's absence, taking advantage of Ziklag's reduced defenses. They burned the settlement and carried off all the women and children, including David's wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. David's men find nothing but ashes and absence. The camp erupts in grief. Strong warriors weep aloud until they have no strength left. Then their grief transforms into rage, directed at David. Let's stone him. David's leadership hangs by a thread. His men blame him for leaving Ziklag vulnerable. They blame him for taking them to serve the Philistines. They blame him for the loss of their families. The loyalty built over years in the wilderness fractures under catastrophic loss. Scripture records a simple phrase that carries immense weight. David found strength in the Lord his God. He calls for Abiathar, the priest, and the ephod. Inquire of the Lord for me. Shall I pursue this raiding party? Will I overtake them? The answer comes back, pursue them. You will certainly overtake them and succeed in the rescue. David takes his 600 men and moves immediately. They reach the Besor Valley. 200 men are too exhausted to continue. David leaves them with the supplies and pushes forward with 400. They find an Egyptian in a field, abandoned near death. He hasn't eaten or drunk for 3 days. David's men give him water and food. His strength returns. He tells his story. He was slave to an Amalekite who abandoned him when he became ill during the raid. Can you lead me down to this raiding party? The Egyptian negotiates. Swear to me by God that you will not give me into the hands of my master or hand me over to him, and I will take you down to them. David swears. The Egyptian guides them to the Amalekite camp. The raiders are spread out, celebrating their victory, eating, drinking, dancing. They're confident, careless, unprepared for retaliation. David attacks at twilight. The battle rages from dusk until evening of the next day. 400 young men escape on camels. Everyone else is struck down. David recovers everything, all the flocks, herds, wives, children. Nothing is missing. When David returns to the Besor Valley, some of his men refuse to share the plunder with the 200 who stayed behind. They didn't go with us, so they don't get a share beyond their own wives and children. David's response establishes a principle that will govern his reign. No, my brothers, you must not do that with what the Lord has given us. He has protected us and delivered into our hands the raiding party that came against us. So the share of the man who stayed with the supplies is to be the same as that of him who went down to the battle. All will share alike. From that day forward, this becomes statute and ordinance in Israel. Those who guard supplies share equally with those who engage in combat. David's justice extends beyond military valor to recognize necessary supporting roles. Meanwhile, far to the north, the Philistine armies engage Saul's forces on Mount Gilboa. The battle goes badly for Israel from the start. The Philistines press hard. Israelite soldiers flee. Men fall on the slopes of Gilboa. The Philistines focus their attack on Saul and his sons. Jonathan fights beside his father. So do Abinadab and Malchishua, Saul's other sons. The Philistine archers find their range. Jonathan falls. The covenant keeper, the loyal friend, the man who surrendered his throne to serve under David, the heir who chose righteousness over inheritance. Abinadab falls. Malchishua falls. 3 of Saul's sons eliminated in a single battle. The dynasty crumbles. The fighting grows intense around Saul. Arrows find him. He's critically wounded, but still conscious, still able to speak. He turns to his armor-bearer. Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me. The armor-bearer refuses. Terror paralyzes him. He cannot bring himself to strike down the Lord's anointed, even at the king's command. Saul takes his own sword. He falls on it. The first king of Israel chooses his own end rather than capture and humiliation. His armor-bearer, seeing Saul fallen, does likewise. 5 deaths: Saul, Jonathan, Abinadab, Malchishua, and the unnamed armor-bearer. The entire royal household collapses in a single afternoon. The Israelite forces across the valley see their king and his sons fallen. Panic spreads. They abandon their towns and flee. The Philistines occupy the vacated territory. The next day, Philistines come to strip the dead. They find Saul and his sons on Mount Gilboa. They cut off Saul's head. They strip his armor. They send messengers throughout Philistine territory to proclaim the news in their temples and among their people. They put Saul's armor in the temple of the Ashtoreths. They fasten his body to the wall of Beth Shan, a public display of triumph and humiliation. When the people of Jabesh Gilead hear what the Philistines have done, they remember. Years ago, when the Ammonites besieged their city, Saul came to their rescue. It was his first major act as king, the moment when his leadership proved itself. The valiant men of Jabesh Gilead march all night. They reach Beth Shan, take down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall, bring them back to Jabesh. They burn them there, then bury the bones under a tamarisk tree. They fast 7 days in mourning. Saul's end comes far from the glory of his beginning. The tall young man who hid among the baggage when Samuel first announced his selection, the king who started with such promise, the man who let jealousy poison everything he touched. He rejected God's word through Samuel. He pursued David with murderous obsession. He consulted a medium at Endor in desperate violation of his own laws. He died by his own hand rather than trust God even in defeat. But in Jabesh Gilead, they remember the good. They honor the man who once saved them. They bury him with dignity despite his failures. David receives the news in Ziklag. A man arrives from Saul's camp, clothes torn, dust on his head. He falls to the ground before David. "Where have you come from?" "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." "What happened? Tell me." The man's report confirms the worst. The men fled from the battle. Many of them fell and perished. And Saul and his son Jonathan are gone. David's question is specific. How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are gone? The messenger tries to make himself look heroic. He claims he happened upon Saul leaning on his spear, with chariots and riders almost upon him. He claims Saul asked him to strike the final blow. He claims he did so, knowing Saul could not survive. He brings Saul's crown and armband as proof, expecting reward. David's response is not what the messenger anticipates. "Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to harm the Lord's anointed?" David calls one of his men. "Go, strike him down." The young man obeys. The messenger is eliminated immediately. "Your blood be on your own head. Your own mouth testified against you when you said, 'I took the life of the Lord's anointed.'" Whether the messenger's story is true or fabricated doesn't matter. He claimed to have struck down Saul. That claim alone merits judgment. David's principle remains consistent. No one touches the Lord's anointed and lives. Then David weeps. His grief is profound and public. He and his men tear their clothes, mourn, weep, and fast until evening. They mourn for Saul. They mourn for Jonathan. They mourn for the army of the Lord and for the nation of Israel, because they have fallen by the sword. David composes a lament. He orders it taught to the people of Judah. The Song of the Bow becomes part of Israel's cultural memory, recorded in the book of Jashar. The lament is extraordinary in its generosity. David, who spent years running from Saul, who nearly died multiple times at Saul's hand, composes a eulogy that emphasizes only glory and omits all failure. "A gazelle lies slain on your heights, Israel. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon, lest the daughters of the Philistines be glad, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised rejoice." He remembers Saul and Jonathan in their strength, in their courage, in the best moments of their lives. He doesn't air grievances or catalog wrongs. He honors them. The portion about Jonathan reveals David's heart most clearly. "I grieve for you, Jonathan, my brother. You were very dear to me. Your love for me was wonderful, more wonderful than that of women. How the mighty have fallen, the weapons of war have perished." The lament becomes Israel's official mourning song for Saul and Jonathan. David's first public act after Saul's passing is not celebration, but grief. He doesn't seize the moment for political advantage. He mourns genuinely for the fallen king and the fallen friend. The wilderness years have ended. The fugitive period is over. Saul is gone. Jonathan is gone. The throne stands empty. But David doesn't rush toward it. He waits, even now, for divine direction about what comes next. The house of Saul has fallen. The question now is how the house of David will rise. King of Judah, war with Israel. David inquires of the Lord. The pattern holds even now, even with the throne vacant and opportunity present. Shall I go up to one of the towns of Judah? The answer, go up. Where shall I go? To Hebron. David moves to Hebron with his wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. His men bring their families. They settle in Hebron's towns. The location is strategic. Hebron sits in the heart of Judah's territory, Abraham's ancient stomping ground, a place heavy with ancestral significance. The men of Judah come to Hebron. They anoint David king over the tribe of Judah, not all Israel, just Judah. The unification David was promised remains incomplete. David hears about the men of Jabesh Gilead, how they buried Saul with honor. He sends messengers to them with words of blessing and political alliance. "The Lord bless you for showing this kindness to Saul your master by burying him. May the Lord now show you kindness and faithfulness, and I too will show you the same favor because you have done this. Now then, be strong and brave, for Saul your master is gone, and the people of Judah have anointed me king over them." The message is gracious but pointed. Saul is finished. A new order is emerging. Choose wisely. But the northern tribes aren't ready to accept David. Abner, son of Ner, commander of Saul's army, takes Ishbosheth, son of Saul, across the Jordan to Mahanaim. There he proclaims Ishbosheth king over Gilead, Ashuri, Jezreel, Ephraim, Benjamin, and all Israel. Ishbosheth is 40 years old when he becomes king. He reigns 2 years, but the real power sits with Abner. The general who failed to protect Saul now protects Saul's dynasty. Ishbosheth is a figurehead. Abner is the force maintaining the northern kingdom's cohesion. Israel splits. David rules in Hebron over Judah for 7.5 years. Ishbosheth rules from Mahanaim over the northern tribes. 2 kingdoms, 2 kings. One nation fractured by competing claims to Saul's succession. The war between the house of Saul and the house of David is long and bitter. Families divide. Blood spills. The unity Israel briefly achieved under Saul dissolves into civil conflict. The first major confrontation happens at the Pool of Gibeon. Abner leads forces from Ishbosheth's court. Joab, son of Zeruiah, David's nephew and military commander, leads forces from David's court. The 2 armies meet at the pool. Abner suggests a controlled combat. Let's have some of the young men get up and fight hand-to-hand in front of us. Joab agrees. All right, let them do it. 12 men from Benjamin and Ishbosheth face 12 from David's servants. They rise, grab each other, thrust swords into each other's sides. All 24 fall simultaneously in what becomes known as Helkath Hazarim, the field of daggers. The controlled combat spirals into general battle. David's men prove stronger. Abner's forces flee. 3 sons of Zeruiah are present, Joab, Abishai, and Asahel. Asahel is swift-footed like a wild gazelle. He singles out Abner and pursues him relentlessly. Abner turns. Is that you, Asahel? It is. Abner tries to dissuade him. Turn aside to the right or to the left. Take on one of the young men and strip him of his weapons, but don't pursue me. Asahel refuses to give up the chase. Abner warns again. Stop chasing me. Why should I strike you down? How could I look your brother Joab in the face? Still Asahel persists. Abner has no choice. He thrusts the butt of his spear into Asahel's stomach. The spear comes out through his back. Asahel falls dead on the spot. Everyone who comes to the place where Asahel fell stops there. But Joab and Abishai pursue Abner. The sun sets as they reach the hill of Ammah near Giah. The men of Benjamin rally around Abner, forming a defensive unit on the hilltop. Abner calls to Joab. Must the sword devour forever? Don't you realize that this will end in bitterness? How long before you order your men to stop pursuing their fellow Israelites? Joab's response is cold. As surely as God lives, if you had not spoken, the men would have continued pursuing them until morning. He sounds the trumpet. The fighting stops. Abner's men march through the night, cross the Jordan, continue through the morning, and reach Mahanaim. Joab returns with David's forces. Casualties are counted. 19 of David's men plus Asahel, 360 of Abner's men. They take Asahel's body to Bethlehem and bury him in his father's tomb. Joab and his men march all night, reaching Hebron at daybreak. The blood feud is established. Joab's brother lies dead by Abner's hand. The personal vendetta overlays the political conflict. Civil war isn't just about competing dynasties anymore. It's about revenge. The war continues year after year. Scripture summarizes the trajectory simply. The house of David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. David's household expands during the Hebron years. Sons are born: Amnon, born to Ahinoam of Jezreel; Chileab, born to Abigail, widow of Nabal; Absalom, son of Maacah, daughter of Talmai, king of Geshur; Adonijah, son of Haggith; Shephatiah, son of Abital; Ithream, born to Eglah. 6 sons by 6 different wives during the 7 years in Hebron. The growing household demonstrates David's power and political alliances, but it also sows seeds of future disaster. Multiple wives mean competing sons with conflicting claims to succession. The family dynamics that will eventually tear David's house apart begin forming in Hebron. Meanwhile, Abner strengthens his position in Ishbosheth's court. The general becomes increasingly bold, increasingly independent. He takes Rizpah, daughter of Aiah, who had been Saul's concubine. In ancient Near Eastern politics, taking a king's concubine is tantamount to claiming the throne. Ishbosheth recognizes the implication. He confronts Abner. "Why did you sleep with my father's concubine?" Abner's rage explodes. "Am I a dog's head on Judah's side?" This very day I am loyal to the house of your father Saul and to his family and friends. I haven't handed you over to David. Yet now you accuse me of an offense involving this woman. May God deal with Abner, be it ever so severely, if I do not do for David what the Lord promised him on oath, and transfer the kingdom from the house of Saul and establish David's throne over Israel and Judah from Dan to Beersheba. Ishbosheth cannot respond. He's terrified of Abner. The puppet king realizes how completely he depends on his general's support. Abner sends messengers to David immediately. His proposition is direct. Whose land is it? Make an agreement with me, and I will help you bring all Israel over to you. David's response shows political savvy. Good, I will make an agreement with you, but I demand one thing. Do not come into my presence unless you bring the daughter of Saul when you come to see me. Michal is David's first wife, Saul's daughter, given to him as reward for delivering those 100 Philistine proofs. But when David fled, Saul gave Michal to another man, Paltiel, son of Laish. Reclaiming her serves multiple purposes. It reasserts David's connection to Saul's house. It demonstrates David's power over Ishbosheth. It corrects an injustice. David sends messengers to Ishbosheth. Give me my wife Michal, whom I betrothed to myself for the bride price of 100 Philistine proofs. Ishbosheth complies. He has no leverage to refuse. He sends men to take her from Paltiel. The text records a heartbreaking detail. Paltiel follows along behind her, weeping, all the way to Bahurim. Only when Abner orders him to go back does he finally turn away. Michal returns to David, but she's not the same woman who helped him escape through a window. She's been with another man. She's lived a different life. The reunion is political necessity, not romantic restoration. Abner confers with the elders of Israel. For some time you have wanted to make David your king. Now do it. For the Lord promised David, by my servant David I will rescue my people Israel from the hand of the Philistines and from the hand of all their enemies. Abner speaks also with the Benjamites, Saul's own tribe. He needs their support most critically. Then he travels to Hebron with 20 men to finalize the arrangement with David. David prepares a feast. Abner eats and drinks, surrounded by David's hospitality. Then he makes his pledge. Let me go at once and assemble all Israel for my lord the king, so that they may make a covenant with you, and that you may rule over all that your heart desires. David sends Abner away in peace. The unification of Israel seems imminent. Abner holds the key. If he brings the northern tribes to David, the civil war ends. David's kingdom becomes reality. But Joab is away on a raid when Abner visits. He returns with plunder to learn that Abner came to Hebron and David sent him away safely. Joab's reaction is immediate and hostile. He goes straight to David. What have you done? Look, Abner came to you. Why did you let him go? Now he is gone. You know Abner came to deceive you and observe your movements and find out everything you are doing. David remains silent. Joab leaves David's presence and sends messengers after Abner. They bring him back from the cistern at Sirah. David knows nothing of this. When Abner returns to Hebron, Joab takes him aside in the gateway as if to speak privately. Then Joab stabs him in the stomach. Abner falls. Blood spills. The general who brought Israel to David dies at the hands of David's commander. Joab's motive is blood revenge for Asahel, but the timing reveals political calculation. With Abner gone, Joab's position as David's military commander faces no rival. The man who might have commanded Israel's forces is eliminated. David hears what happened. His response is swift and public. I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner, son of Ner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his whole family. May Joab's family never be without someone who has a running sore or leprosy, or who leans on a crutch, or who falls by the sword, or who lacks food. Strong words. A curse on Joab's household. But David doesn't execute Joab. He can't afford to. Joab commands the army. Joab delivered victories. Joab's loyalty, however brutal its expression, belongs to David. David orders a public mourning. Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and walk in mourning in front of Abner. David himself walks behind the bier. They bury Abner in Hebron. The king weeps aloud at the tomb. All the people weep. David composes a lament. Should Abner have died as the lawless perish, your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered, you fell as one falls before the wicked. All the people weep again. They come to persuade David to eat something while it's still day, but he takes an oath. May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if I taste bread or anything else before the sun sets. The public mourning serves political necessity. David must distance himself from Abner's murder. He must show Israel that this was not his doing, not part of some scheme. His genuine grief is visible. The people take note. All the people took note and were pleased. Indeed, everything the king did pleased them. So on that day, all the people there and all Israel knew that the king had no part in the slaying of Abner, son of Ner. David speaks to his officials. Do you not realize that a commander and a great man has fallen in Israel this day? And today, though I am the anointed king, I am weak, and these sons of Zeruiah are too strong for me. May the Lord repay the evildoer according to his evil deeds. The admission is remarkably honest. David is king, but Joab operates with frightening independence. The general's power constrains the king's options. The relationship will define and complicate David's entire reign. News of Abner's death reaches Ishbosheth. He loses courage. All Israel becomes alarmed. With Abner gone, the northern kingdom has no spine. Ishbosheth is king in name only, and now the name is all he has left. The house of Saul is collapsing. The house of David is rising. But the path to unification runs through blood, betrayal, and consequences that will echo for generations. The unification two men named Baanah and Rechab, brothers from the tribe of Benjamin, serve as commanders in Ishbosheth's army. They're sons of Rimmon from Beeroth, a town counted as part of Benjamin. They've watched Abner fall. They've seen Ishbosheth's courage drain. They recognize the inevitable trajectory. They make a decision. At midday, when Ishbosheth is taking his rest, Baanah and Rechab enter the king's house. They go into the inner part of the house as if getting wheat. Ishbosheth lies on his bed in his bedroom. The brothers strike him, ending his life. They cut off his head and take it with them, traveling all night by way of the Arabah. They arrive at Hebron. They present Ishbosheth's head to David, expecting reward. Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to take your life. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring. David's expression doesn't match their expectation. His response echoes what he told the messenger who claimed to have struck down Saul. As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of every trouble, when someone told me Saul is gone and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more when wicked men have slain an innocent person in his own house and on his own bed? Should I not now demand his blood from your hand and remove you from the earth? David commands his men. They strike down Baanah and Rechab, cut off their hands and feet, and hang the bodies by the pool in Hebron. The message is clear and public. David doesn't reward those who eliminate his rivals. He punishes them. They take Ishbosheth's head and bury it in Abner's tomb at Hebron. The gesture is significant. The puppet king who lost his protector is buried with that protector. Both men worked to preserve Saul's dynasty. Both failed. Both rest together. With Ishbosheth gone, the northern tribes have no alternative. 7 years of civil war have exhausted them. David's strength has grown consistently while Saul's house has weakened. The trajectory is undeniable. All the tribes of Israel come to David at Hebron. Their statement acknowledges both kinship and history. We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, while Saul was king over us, you were the one who led Israel on their military campaigns. And the Lord said to you, you will shepherd my people Israel, and you will become their ruler. They invoke divine promise. They recognize David's proven military leadership. They acknowledge the failure of Saul's dynasty to maintain itself. When all the elders of Israel come to King David at Hebron, he makes a covenant with them before the Lord. They anoint David king over Israel. The moment is enormous. David is 30 years old when he becomes king. He reigns in Hebron over Judah 7 years and 6 months. He will reign over all Israel and Judah combined from Jerusalem 33 years. The total, 40 years. A complete generation. The shepherd boy anointed in secret becomes the acknowledged king of a united nation. But the unification is fragile. The northern tribes accept David out of necessity, not universal enthusiasm. Benjamin, Saul's tribe, harbors resentment. The wounds of civil war are fresh. Families on opposite sides still remember losses. David recognizes the challenge immediately. He needs a capital that belongs to neither Judah nor Israel, a neutral site that doesn't favor one faction over another. Hebron serves Judah perfectly, but it alienates the northern tribes. Jerusalem sits on the border between Benjamin and Judah, controlled by neither. The problem: Jerusalem is held by the Jebusites, a Canaanite people who have occupied the fortress city for generations. The site is naturally defensible, built on ridges with steep valleys on three sides. Previous Israelite attempts to capture it have failed. David marches on Jerusalem with his men. The Jebusites, confident in their defenses, mock the assault. "You will not get in here. Even the blind and the lame can ward you off." The taunt stings. The implication is clear. Jerusalem is so impregnable that disabled defenders could hold it against David's army. The Jebusites consider themselves untouchable. David issues a challenge to his men. Anyone who conquers the Jebusites will have to use the water shaft to reach the lame and blind, who are David's enemies. The water shaft reference suggests infiltration through Jerusalem's water system. Joab takes up the challenge. He leads a strike force through the water tunnel, emerging inside the city's defenses. The fortress falls from within. David captures the stronghold of Zion, which becomes the City of David. He takes up residence there and builds up the area around it, working inward from the supporting terraces. His power grows steadily. The Lord God Almighty is with him. Hiram, king of Tyre, sends messengers to David, along with cedar logs and carpenters and stonemasons. They build a palace for David. The international recognition is significant. Neighboring powers acknowledge David's kingship. Trade relationships develop. Alliances form. David perceives something crucial. The Lord has established me as king over Israel and has exalted my kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. The kingship isn't about David's glory. It's about Israel's welfare. The throne exists to serve the people, not the other way around. This understanding, when David maintains it, makes him a good king. When he forgets it, catastrophe follows. David takes more concubines and wives in Jerusalem. More sons and daughters are born. The household expands. Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Japhia, Elishama, Eliada, Eliphalet. The Philistines hear that David has been anointed king over all Israel. Their response is immediate military action. A united Israel under capable leadership threatens Philistine interests. They march out in full force to search for David. David hears about it and goes down to the stronghold. The Philistines deploy in the valley of Rephaim. David inquires of the Lord, "Shall I go and attack the Philistines? Will you deliver them into my hands?" The answer, "Go, for I will surely deliver the Philistines into your hands." David attacks at Baal Perazim. The victory is decisive. "The Lord has broken out against my enemies before me like breaking a dam," David says. The place becomes known as Baal Perazim, which means the Lord who breaks out. The Philistines abandon their idols in their retreat. David and his men carry them off, claiming them as spoils. The Philistines regroup and deploy again in the valley of Rephaim. Again, David inquires of the Lord. This time the strategy changes. Do not go straight up, but circle around behind them and attack them in front of the poplar trees. As soon as you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the poplar trees, move quickly, because that will mean the Lord has gone out in front of you to strike the Philistine army. David follows the instructions exactly. He strikes down the Philistines from Gibeon to Gezer. The enemy threat is neutralized. Israel's borders are secured. The dual victories establish David's military credibility with the northern tribes. They see that God fights for David as he never fought for Saul. They see strategic brilliance combined with divine favor. The combination is unbeatable. David's unification of Israel succeeds through multiple factors working together. Military strength proves he can defend the nation. Political wisdom shows in choosing Jerusalem as a neutral capital. Spiritual sensitivity appears in his consistent inquiry of the Lord before major decisions. Justice is visible in his execution of Ishbosheth's murderers. But underneath all practical considerations runs the fundamental reality: God's anointing remains on David. What was promised in Bethlehem when Samuel poured oil on a shepherd boy now manifests in national leadership. The years of running are finished. The civil war is ended. The kingdom is united. The capital is established. The enemies are defeated. David stands at the height of success. Everything he touches prospers. Every decision proves sound. Every battle ends in victory. The trajectory is consistently upward. He doesn't know that his greatest challenges won't come from external enemies or rival claimants to the throne. They'll come from within his own house, from the sons born in Hebron and Jerusalem, from choices made in moments of moral weakness, from the accumulated weight of polygamy and family dysfunction. But for now, in this moment, David embodies everything Israel hoped a king would be: strong, wise, just, faithful to God, victorious in battle, expanding the nation's territory and influence. The shepherd has become king, the fugitive has become monarch, the anointed has become acknowledged, the promise has become reality. Israel is united under David. Jerusalem is conquered. The dynasty is established. The stage is set for a reign that will define the nation's identity for millennia. Ark, covenant, and dynasty. The king stands at the edge of the threshing floor, watching the oxen stumble. The Ark of the Covenant tilts. Uzzah reaches out to steady it. He touches the sacred object. He falls dead instantly. David freezes. Terror floods through him. The procession stops. Music dies. Dancing ceases. The presence of the divine isn't a metaphor. It's dangerous. It's real. It consumes. The shepherd boy who faced giants now fears bringing God's presence into his capital. 3 months pass. The ark sits in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. Reports come back. Blessings overflow. Crops flourish. Livestock multiply. The household prospers beyond measure. God's presence doesn't destroy when approached with reverence. The message becomes clear. Fear must give way to proper worship. David tries again. This time everything changes. Sacrifices occur every 6 steps. Priests carry the ark correctly, using poles through rings as prescribed. No carts, no shortcuts, no human innovation replacing divine instruction. The king removes his royal robes. He wraps himself in a simple linen ephod, the garment of a priest. He dances before the Lord with abandon. He leaps, he spins, he shouts. The mighty warrior who conquered nations humbles himself completely. The procession enters Jerusalem through cheering crowds. Trumpets blast, cymbals crash, voices rise in songs composed for this exact moment. The city of David receives the throne of God. Political capital becomes spiritual center. The neutral ground between tribes transforms into the dwelling place of divine presence. David pitches a special tent. The ark enters its new home. Burnt offerings rise. Peace offerings follow. The king blesses the people in the name of the Lord. He distributes food to every person, bread and meat and raisins. The celebration extends to all Israel, from the greatest to the least. But someone watches from a palace window with contempt in her heart. Michal, Saul's daughter, David's wife, sees her husband dancing and considers him undignified. The daughter of a failed dynasty cannot understand the worship of a man secure in God's choice. She sees weakness where David shows strength. She sees foolishness where David displays wisdom. She sees disgrace where David offers pure devotion. The confrontation comes later. Sharp words pass between them. David's response cuts through her criticism like a blade. He danced before the Lord who chose him over her father. He'll become even more undignified than this. He'll humble himself further. The maidservants she mocks will honor him for it. Michal bears no children to the day of her death. The line of Saul ends. The dynasty of David begins. The king sits in his palace of cedar, watching the sun set over Jerusalem. Comfort surrounds him. Peace reigns. Enemies flee or submit. The shepherd finally rests from wandering. But something troubles him. God's ark dwells in a tent while David lives in a palace. The contrast bothers him deeply. He calls Nathan the prophet. He shares his concern. He wants to build a house for the Lord, a temple worthy of the divine presence. Nathan approves immediately. The idea sounds righteous. The prophet speaks before consulting heaven. He assumes God's will aligns with obvious piety. That night, God speaks to Nathan. The message reverses everything. David will not build God a house. God will build David a house. The wordplay carries weight. The temple will wait for another generation. But the dynasty, that begins now. That endures forever. The oracle flows through Nathan with promises that reshape history. David's son will build the temple. David's throne will never end. David's kingdom will establish itself eternally. When David's children sin, discipline will come, but the covenant won't break. The love won't depart the way it departed from Saul. The promise stands firm across generations. The scope expands beyond anything David imagined. He wanted to honor God with construction. God responds by honoring David with an eternal covenant. Human plans give way to divine purposes. The refugee who hid in caves will father a line of kings stretching beyond sight. Nathan delivers the message. David's response becomes one of Scripture's most remarkable prayers. The king enters the tent of the ark. He sits before the Lord, not standing in regal authority, sitting in humble wonder. The posture speaks volumes. Who am I, Lord God? What is my family? The questions frame everything that follows. David traces his journey from shepherd to sovereign. He marvels at God's grace. He acknowledges his unworthiness. He recognizes the magnitude of what's been promised. The prayer shifts from past to future. David grasps the implications. This covenant extends beyond his lifetime. This promise shapes nations. This dynasty carries messianic hope. The shepherd sees his descendants ruling in perpetuity. He asks God to do as promised, not because he deserves it, not because he earned it, but because God's character guarantees it. The prayer rests on divine faithfulness, not human merit. The words echo through the tent. They ripple across centuries. They establish the foundation for every hope of restoration when kingdoms fall. They plant seeds of expectation that bloom into prophecies of an anointed one who will reign forever. David rises from prayer a different man. The weight of destiny settles on his shoulders alongside the weight of crown. His house will endure, his throne will stand, his line will continue. The Davidic covenant transforms Israel's understanding of kingship. Monarchy becomes more than political convenience. It carries theological significance. The king represents God's rule on earth. The throne channels divine authority. The dynasty embodies covenant promises, but embedded in the blessing lies responsibility. David's children will face discipline for sin. The covenant includes correction. Grace doesn't eliminate accountability. Love doesn't remove consequences. The promise holds, but judgment still falls. The moment crystallizes everything David's life represents. A man after God's own heart doesn't mean a man without sin. It means a man whose heart turns toward God in repentance and worship. It means a man who receives grace and extends it. It means a man who dances before the Lord without shame. Jerusalem pulses with new significance. The city houses both ark and palace. The threshing floor where the plague stopped will become the site of the temple. Geography and theology merge. Physical space becomes sacred ground. The city of David earns its name through more than conquest. Israel's golden age begins. United tribes, secure borders, divine presence dwelling among the people. A king who worships and a promise that endures. The shepherd's psalm transforms into reality. Goodness and mercy follow him. He dwells in the house of the Lord. His cup overflows. The dynasty takes root. The covenant stands established. The throne gains eternal dimension, but ahead lies the test. The promise guarantees David's line continues. It doesn't guarantee every king succeeds. The covenant ensures the dynasty survives. It doesn't prevent disaster from visiting individual generations. David's greatest triumph in receiving God's promise will magnify his greatest failure when he violates God's law. The man who danced before the ark will commit acts that haunt his house. The king who knew God's heart will break God's commands. The covenant holds despite what comes. The promise persists through judgment. The dynasty endures beyond disaster. Jerusalem settles into its new role, the city of peace, the dwelling place, the capital of God's chosen king and God's chosen people. From this place, the line of David will run through centuries, through good kings and evil ones, through prosperity and exile, through hope and heartbreak, all the way to a son of David born in Bethlehem, the city where this story began. Empire and administration, blood soaks the eastern desert. David's army sweeps through Moab. The campaign is brutal, efficient, complete. The conquered lie in lines measured by cord. 2/3 perish, 1/3 survives to serve. The shepherd who once showed mercy to Saul now shows none to Israel's enemies. The nations around Israel watch and tremble. Syria mobilizes. The Arameans gather forces from multiple kingdoms. They march to meet Israel's growing power. The battle at Helam decides everything. 20,000 Aramean foot soldiers fall. Their commander dies. The survivors flee. Damascus becomes a vassal state. Garrisons occupy their cities. Tribute flows to Jerusalem. Edom follows. David's army enters their territory. The Valley of Salt runs red. 18,000 dead. The entire nation submits. More garrisons, more tribute. The empire expands. The Ammonites make a fatal mistake. Their king dies. David sends condolences. Ammonite counselors convince the new king that David's ambassadors are spies. They seize David's men. They shave half their beards. They cut their garments at the hips. They send them back humiliated. War becomes inevitable. The Ammonites realize their error. They hire Syrian mercenaries. Massive forces gather. The combined armies outnumber Israel significantly. Joab leads the campaign with characteristic ruthlessness. He divides his forces. He attacks on two fronts. He crushes both Ammonites and Syrians simultaneously. The Syrians regroup. They bring reinforcements from beyond the Euphrates. The armies meet again. David leads this battle personally. 700 charioteers fall. 40,000 horsemen die. The Syrian commander dies on the field. Every Aramean kingdom makes peace. They send tribute. They refuse to help Ammon again. The Ammonite capital of Rabbah endures a long siege. The city finally falls. David takes the crown from their king's head. It weighs 75 pounds of gold set with precious stones. He places it on his own head. The symbolism speaks clearly. Their king is dead. Their kingdom belongs to David now. The spoils from these campaigns stagger the imagination. Gold flows into Jerusalem. Silver arrives in wagon loads. Bronze comes in quantities too large to weigh. David dedicates it all to the Lord. The wealth of nations accumulates for the temple his son will build. The empire stretches from the Egyptian border to the Euphrates River, from the Mediterranean to the desert. Territory Solomon will inherit, but David conquered. The Promised Land reaches its maximum extent under the shepherd king's rule. But empire requires more than conquest. It demands organization. David builds an administration that rivals any ancient Near Eastern power. The structure is sophisticated, layered, efficient. The shepherd who lived in caves now governs a state machinery that processes tribute from a dozen nations. Joab remains commander of the army. His position never wavers despite his brutality and independence. He's too valuable, too effective, too feared by Israel's enemies. David needs him even when he doesn't trust him. Benaiah commands the Kerethites and Pelethites. These foreign mercenaries serve as David's personal bodyguard and special forces. They're loyal to the king alone, not to any tribe. Their presence ensures David's security in ways Israelite troops cannot. The mighty men form an elite inner circle, 37 warriors whose exploits become legendary, men who broke through Philistine lines to bring David water from Bethlehem's well just because he wished for it aloud, men who stood alone against enemy armies, men whose loyalty exceeds reason. Jehoshaphat serves as recorder, maintaining official chronicles and managing protocol. Sariah works as secretary, handling correspondence and documents. Zadok and Abiathar share the priesthood, representing different priestly lines and tribal interests. David's sons serve as priests, a controversial arrangement that shows the king's religious authority. The lines between sacred and secular blur in David's court. The shepherd king integrates worship and governance in ways that both elevate and complicate both. The administrative machine processes massive operations, tribute collection from vassal states, resource distribution to building projects, military logistics for campaigns across hundreds of miles, trade regulation with now peaceful neighbors, justice administration for a multi-tribal nation. Census records track population across territories. Tax collectors gather resources. Regional governors manage distant provinces. The sophistication matches any contemporary empire. The former fugitive proves himself an able administrator. But David's genius appears most clearly in his military organization. He maintains standing armies and reserves. Professional soldiers serve year-round. Tribal militias mobilize when needed. The combination gives Israel both constant readiness and massive mobilization capacity. The divisions rotate monthly, 12 groups of 24,000 men each. Every month brings fresh troops while maintaining a core of experienced warriors. The system keeps men trained without exhausting the nation's manpower. Foreign mercenaries supplement Israelite forces. Gittites from Philistine cities, Kerethites from Crete, Pelethites from somewhere lost to history. These professional warriors show no tribal loyalty. They serve the crown alone. Their presence balances tribal tensions and provides a force loyal only to David. The intelligence network extends across the empire. Spies operate in hostile territories. Informants report from vassal states. David knows when enemies mobilize before they cross borders. Information flows to Jerusalem constantly. Diplomatic relations develop with nations too distant to conquer. Tyre sends craftsmen and materials. Hamath sends gifts and recognition. The empire's reputation extends beyond its borders. David's name carries weight from Egypt to Mesopotamia. The economic transformation mirrors the military one. Jerusalem evolves from a captured Jebusite town into a thriving capital. Construction booms, trade flourishes, artisans arrive from allied nations. The city grows wealthy on tribute and trade. David's palace stands as a symbol, cedar from Lebanon, craftsmen from Tyre. The architecture announces Israel's arrival as a regional power. The shepherd's tent gives way to royal chambers. The cave dweller inhabits halls of state. But the administration serves a purpose beyond glorifying the king. It maintains justice across the empire. It enables worship at the central sanctuary. It defends the weak against the strong. It enforces God's law throughout the land. David's justice becomes legendary. He judges fairly between rich and poor. He shows special concern for widows and orphans. His administration extends protection to the vulnerable. The king remembers his own time as a fugitive, desperate for justice that never came from Saul. The empire it builds will stand as the template for every future hope of restoration. When kingdoms fall and exile comes, prophets will speak of a return to Davidic glory. When occupation crushes Israel, rebels will dream of throwing off foreign rule and reestablishing David's kingdom. The administration he creates will outlive him. Solomon will inherit both empire and bureaucracy. The structure will persist through division and decline. The model will influence Israel's governance for centuries. But empires built by conquest face constant challenges. Vassal states chafe under tribute. Garrisons breed resentment. Peace requires continual enforcement. David's military remains active throughout his reign, suppressing rebellions and intimidating potential enemies. The cost in blood is high. Every border is drawn in warfare. Every province is secured through force. The empire's foundation rests on violence. The shepherd king's hands drip with the blood of thousands. David dedicates the spoils of war to God. He cannot build the temple himself because he's shed too much blood. The wealth he accumulates will construct the house of God, but a son of peace must do the building. David's role is conquest. Solomon's will be consolidation. The irony cuts deep. The man after God's own heart is too bloodstained to build God's house. The king who brings the ark to Jerusalem cannot construct its permanent dwelling. Success in warfare disqualifies him from the highest honor. But the empire stands, the administration functions, the borders hold secure. Israel experiences prosperity and peace unknown since entering Canaan. The shepherd boy delivers on the promise his anointing represented. From Bethlehem to Jerusalem, from caves to palaces, from fugitive to emperor, David's rise completes. The kingdom reaches its zenith. The golden age begins. The shepherd king rules a realm that would make his father Jesse's head spin. The boy who tended sheep now commands armies that span territories larger than any patriarch imagined. The promise to Abraham finds fulfillment in David's empire. But at the peak of power, danger arrives. Not from outside enemies, not from rival nations, not from rebellious provinces, from within, from the king's own heart, from a rooftop view on a spring evening when kings usually march to war. The empire stands strong. The administration runs smoothly. The military remains undefeated, but the king is about to fall. The king's dark heart spring arrives in Jerusalem, the time when kings march to war. David stays home. His armies besiege Rabbah under Joab's command. The military machine functions without him. The empire runs on systems he built. The king finds himself with leisure he hasn't known since youth. Time to rest. Time to wander his palace. Time to be alone with his thoughts. Evening comes. Sleep eludes him. He walks on the palace roof, where cool breezes offer relief from the day's heat. Jerusalem spreads below him, his city, his capital, his achievement. He sees a woman bathing. The distance doesn't hide her beauty. The evening light catches her form. David stops walking. He stares. Desire floods through him with intensity that drowns thought. He sends someone to inquire about her. The answer returns with complications already visible. Her name is Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, wife of Uriah the Hittite. Uriah, one of David's mighty men, a foreign warrior who serves Israel faithfully, a soldier currently fighting David's war at Rabbah, a man who deserves his king's protection and honor. David sends for her anyway. She comes because the king commands. Power dynamics leave no room for refusal. The shepherd who ran from Saul's spear now wields authority that cannot be questioned. She enters his chambers. He takes her. She returns home. Weeks pass. A message arrives. 3 words change everything. I am pregnant. Panic replaces desire. The consequences become clear. Bathsheba's husband has been at war for months. The timeline makes David's adultery obvious to anyone who counts. Scandal threatens the king who brought God's ark to Jerusalem. The man who danced before the Lord now faces exposure. David's mind turns to solutions. He sends word to Joab, bring Uriah back from the siege. A simple plan forms. If Uriah sleeps with his wife, the child can pass as his. The timeline becomes ambiguous. The secret stays hidden. Uriah arrives. David asks about the war, about Joab, about the troops. Casual conversation masking desperate intent. Then David dismisses him. Go home. Wash your feet. Rest. Uriah doesn't go home. He sleeps at the palace entrance with the king's servants. Duty and honor keep him from his wife while his comrades sleep in tents on the battlefield. The warrior's integrity exposes the king's corruption. David hears about it. He calls Uriah back. Haven't you been on a journey? Why didn't you go home? Uriah's answer cuts like a blade. The ark and Israel and Judah dwell in tents. Joab and the army camp in the open field. How can he go to his house to eat and drink and sleep with his wife? He swears he won't do it. The soldier's righteousness shames the king. But shame doesn't stop David. He invites Uriah to dine with him. He gets him drunk. Surely intoxication will overcome honor. Surely wine will send him home to his wife. Uriah sleeps with the servants again. Even drunk, his integrity holds. 2 plans have failed. Desperation breeds darker thoughts. David's heart descends further. If Uriah won't unknowingly cover David's sin, then Uriah must disappear. The step from adultery to murder comes easier than it should. David writes a letter to Joab. The instructions are clear, efficient, evil. Put Uriah in the front line where fighting is fiercest. Then withdraw from him. Let the enemy strike him down. The cruelty deepens. David sends the letter with Uriah. The faithful soldier carries his own death sentence to the commander who will execute it. Trust and honor make him the instrument of his own destruction. Joab follows orders. He assigns Uriah to assault the city wall where defenders are strongest. The attack begins. Uriah fights bravely. The troops pull back. Arrows rain down from the wall. Uriah the Hittite falls. Other soldiers die too. Joab makes it look like a tactical error rather than assassination, collateral damage to hide murder. Other wives will mourn because David wanted one woman. The messenger brings news to Jerusalem. He delivers Joab's report carefully. Men died in the assault. The fighting came too close to the wall. The defenders shot from above. Several fell, including Uriah the Hittite. Joab anticipates David's anger about the tactical mistake. The messenger prepares for royal fury about losses. But the instructions include a final line. When David gets angry, tell him Uriah the Hittite is dead also. The messenger delivers the news. David's response reveals everything. Don't let this upset you. The sword devours one as well as another. Press the attack. Overthrow the city. No anger, no rebuke for tactical errors, no grief for fallen soldiers, just encouragement to finish the campaign. The king's reaction exposes his guilt to anyone paying attention. Joab certainly notices. The commander now holds David's secret and therefore holds power over David. Bathsheba mourns. The customary period passes. Grief for her husband, fear for her future, understanding of what happened or innocence of the plot. Scripture doesn't say. Her voice vanishes from the narrative. The mourning ends. David sends for her. He brings her to the palace. He makes her his wife. She bears a son. The cover-up appears complete, the scandal avoided, the secret buried with Uriah at Rabbah. David returns to normal life. The administrative work continues. The empire functions. Everything looks fine on the surface. But someone sees, someone knows, someone cares deeply about what happened on that roof and in those chambers and on that battlefield. The last line of the account carries weight that crushes kingdoms. 5 Hebrew words, 7 in English. The thing David had done displeased the Lord. Displeased. The understatement echoes across centuries. The God who made David king watches him destroy a faithful servant. The God who promised an eternal dynasty sees the king violate every law that makes a dynasty worthy. The God who looked at David's heart when Samuel brought oil to Bethlehem now sees what that heart has become. David's sin encompasses everything the law forbids: coveting his neighbor's wife, adultery, murder, bearing false witness through the fabricated military report, abusing power entrusted by God. The man after God's own heart has become the man who breaks God's commandments. The shepherd who protected his flock has devoured one of his own sheep. The king who danced before the ark has defiled himself beyond anything Saul ever did. Power corrupted what anointing had sanctified. Success poisoned what humility had purified. Leisure destroyed what struggle had built. The very achievement of peace created space for sin that warfare never allowed. David's empire stands secure. His administration runs efficiently. His armies remain undefeated. His dynasty appears guaranteed by divine covenant. But the foundation cracks. The rot begins. The consequences gather like storm clouds. The prophet Nathan receives a message from the Lord. The time for mercy has ended. The time for judgment begins. A reckoning comes for the king who forgot that greater power brings greater accountability. David sits in his palace of cedar, believing the secret is safe. Bathsheba tends their son. Uriah lies in an unmarked grave at Rabbah. The other soldiers killed in the assault are forgotten. Life moves forward, but God remembers. God sees. God prepares to speak. The man who once ran from Saul through the wilderness cannot run from this. The fugitive who hid in caves finds no hiding place from divine justice. The king who conquered nations will be conquered by the consequences of his own choices. Spring came to Jerusalem. Kings marched to war. David stayed home. Now winter approaches, not the winter of seasons, the winter of the soul, the winter of judgment, the winter that will last the rest of David's life. The thing David had done displeased the Lord. Everything that follows flows from this moment. Every tragedy that strikes his house traces back to this roof, this woman, this choice. The golden age ends before anyone realizes it's over. The shepherd king stands at the summit of power. The fall begins, the darkness comes, and a prophet approaches the palace with a story about sheep. You are the man. Nathan enters the palace. David welcomes him warmly. The prophet has been a trusted advisor since the king's early days. His presence brings comfort, counsel, divine confirmation. No tension marks this visit. No warning signs flash, just a prophet visiting his king. Nathan tells a story. 2 men lived in a certain town, one rich, one poor. The rich man owned enormous flocks and herds, sheep and cattle beyond counting, wealth that stretched across the hills, more than one man could use in a lifetime. The poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb. He bought it. He raised it. It grew up with his children. It ate from his plate. It drank from his cup. It slept in his arms. It was like a daughter to him. David leans forward. His shepherd's heart engages with the story. He knows the bond between a man and a beloved animal. He remembers his own flock in the fields outside Bethlehem. A traveler came to the rich man. The wealthy man wanted to prepare a meal for his guest, but he refused to take from his own flocks. Instead, he took the poor man's lamb. He slaughtered it. He prepared it for his visitor. The story ends. David's face flushes with rage. His fist strikes the arm of his throne. The injustice of it overwhelms him. His voice thunders through the hall. As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. He must pay for that lamb 4 times over because he did such a thing and had no pity. The pronouncement hangs in the air. David's anger fills the space. His sense of justice demands satisfaction. The powerful should not crush the weak. The wealthy should not exploit the poor. A man's only treasure deserves protection. Nathan doesn't move. His eyes lock on David's. The next words come quiet, but they shake the foundations of the kingdom. You are the man. Silence. The king's anger drains away. Color leaves his face. The prophet's words land like hammer blows. Nathan speaks the Lord's message. The indictment flows with precision. God took David from the pasture. God made him king over Israel. God delivered him from Saul. God gave him his master's house. God gave him the kingdom of Israel and Judah. God would have given him even more if that hadn't been enough. Why did David despise the word of the Lord? Why did he do evil in God's sight? The charges come specific and damning. David struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword. David took his wife. David used the Ammonites to murder him. The sword struck Uriah, but David wielded it. The distance from Jerusalem to Rabbah doesn't create innocence. The sentence follows the indictment. The sword will never depart from David's house. Because he despised God and took Uriah's wife, disaster will rise against him from his own family. What David did in secret, God will do to him in broad daylight before all Israel. The prophet finishes. The throne room falls silent except for David's breathing. Every excuse dies unspoken. Every justification crumbles. Every defense collapses. David doesn't argue. He doesn't minimize. He doesn't shift blame to Bathsheba or to circumstance or to the pressures of kingship. He doesn't claim ignorance of the law or special exemption for royalty. 4 words: direct, immediate, complete. I have sinned against the Lord. The confession breaks like a dam releasing floodwaters. The man after God's own heart faces what his heart has done. The king who judged the rich man in Nathan's story now accepts judgment on himself. The shepherd who showed mercy to Saul accepts that he showed none to Uriah. Nathan's response comes swift. The Lord has taken away your sin. You will not die. Mercy interrupts justice. The death David deserved won't come. The execution he pronounced on the rich man won't fall on him. Grace appears in the midst of judgment, but grace doesn't eliminate consequences. Nathan continues, because David's sin gave enemies of the Lord occasion to blaspheme, the son born to him will die. The innocent will suffer for the guilty. The child conceived in adultery will pay the price. David escapes. Nathan leaves. David remains on his throne, alone with the weight of what he's done and what's coming. The baby falls ill. David tears his robes. He spreads sackcloth on the ground. He throws himself down. He refuses food. He spends nights lying on the ground. He pleads with God for the child's life. 7 days pass. The servants watch their king deteriorate. They whisper among themselves, afraid to tell him the news. If he acted this way while the child lived, what will he do when death comes? The child dies. David sees his servants whispering. He understands. He asks the question he already knows the answer to. Is the child dead? He is dead. David rises from the ground. He washes. He changes clothes. He goes to the house of the Lord. He worships. Then he goes home. He asks for food. He eats. The servants stare in confusion. While the child lived, David fasted and wept. Now that the child has died, he eats and moves on. David's answer reveals hard wisdom. While the child lived, he could hope. He could fast and pray. Perhaps the Lord would be gracious. Perhaps mercy would extend to the innocent, but the child is dead. Fasting can't bring him back. David will go to him one day. The child won't return to David. Acceptance replaces bargaining. Grief gives way to reality. David acknowledges God's judgment and moves forward into the consequences. But the encounter with Nathan cuts deeper than the child's death. The confrontation strips away every pretense. The prophet's story forced David to judge himself before he knew he was doing it. The trap was perfect. The guilty condemned himself. David's response to Nathan's confrontation produces Psalm 51. The prayer flows from a broken spirit that knows no hiding place exists. Have mercy on me, O God, according to your unfailing love. According to your great compassion, blot out my transgressions, wash away my iniquity, cleanse me from my sin. The confession continues. David acknowledges his sin is always before him. Against God only has he sinned. The evil was done in God's sight. God's judgment is justified. God's sentence is right. The psalm exposes David's understanding. Sin isn't primarily about harming others, though Uriah certainly suffered. Sin is rebellion against God. David violated divine law. He broke covenant. He defied the one who made him king. The prayer asks for internal transformation. Create in me a pure heart. Renew a steadfast spirit within me. Don't cast me from your presence. Don't take your Holy Spirit from me. The memory of Saul's rejection haunts these lines. David saw what happened when God's Spirit departed. He begs for a different fate. Restore to me the joy of your salvation. Grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. The requests acknowledge that David can't fix himself. Repentance isn't enough. Human effort won't heal divine relationship. God must act or the breach remains. The psalm reveals something profound about David. His greatness isn't sinlessness. His distinction isn't moral perfection. His place as a man after God's own heart doesn't mean he never broke God's heart. It means he returns. It means he repents. It means he refuses to hide or justify or minimize. It means he throws himself on divine mercy with nothing to offer except confession and need. Saul made excuses when confronted. He blamed circumstances. He justified disobedience. He clung to his crown even as it slipped away. David confesses immediately. He accepts responsibility completely. He acknowledges justice in the judgment. He seeks mercy, not vindication. The difference defines their destinies. Saul's kingdom was torn away. David's dynasty endures, not because David's sin was less, not because his crime was minor, but because his response to conviction was humble and honest. The prophet's confrontation transforms David's reign. The golden age dims, the shadow lengthens. The consequences Nathan pronounced will unfold with terrible precision. The sword will never depart from David's house. The words prove prophetic. Tragedy will follow tragedy. Rebellion will rise from David's own children. What he did in secret will happen to him in public view. But the covenant holds, the promise stands, the dynasty continues. Because when confronted with his sin, David didn't make excuses. He said 4 words, "I have sinned against the Lord." The throne room empties. The servants resume duties. The palace returns to normal rhythms. But nothing is normal. Nothing will be normal again. The man who took another man's wife will watch his son take his wives. The king who sent a faithful soldier to death will flee from his own son's rebellion. The father who let passion override duty will weep over a son who died in defiance. The story Nathan told about sheep was a mirror. The rich man who took the poor man's lamb was David himself. The judgment David pronounced was his own sentence. 4 times over, he said, "The penalty must be 4-fold. 4 of David's sons will die: Bathsheba's infant, Amnon, Absalom, Adonijah." The number David set becomes the number he pays. But through the judgment, grace operates. David lives. The dynasty continues. The covenant isn't broken. Bathsheba will bear another son, Solomon, the one who builds the temple, the one who inherits the kingdom. From sin and judgment and mercy comes the king who succeeds David. From adultery and murder and repentance flows the dynasty's continuation. The mess of human failure becomes the material of divine purpose. Nathan's confrontation stands as the hinge of David's story. Everything before leads to this moment. Everything after flows from it. The shepherd's rise ends. The king's decline begins. But in the decline, a deeper truth emerges. God doesn't choose perfect people. God chooses people who return when they stray. God doesn't anoint sinless kings. God anoints kings who confess their sin. The prophet leaves the palace. The king remains on his throne. The child lies dead. The future looms dark with promised consequences. But somewhere in the ruins of David's righteousness, something survives. The capacity to hear God's word even when it cuts, the humility to accept judgment even when it hurts, the faith to seek mercy even when it seems impossible. You are the man. 4 words from Nathan that changed everything. 4 words from David that saved everything. The empire stands secure. The throne sits occupied. The administration functions. The army remains undefeated, but the king's dark heart has been exposed, and the light that reveals it is the same light that offers healing. The reckoning has begun, the rape of Tamar and Absalom's vengeance. Amnon watches his half-sister Tamar. Desire becomes obsession. The king's firstborn son fixates on his father's daughter, beautiful, innocent, forbidden. The law prohibits what Amnon craves. Blood ties that should protect her make him want her more. The wanting makes him sick, literally sick. His friend Jonadab, David's nephew, notices. Shrewd and calculating, Jonadab sees opportunity in Amnon's weakness. "Why are you so haggard morning after morning? Tell me." Amnon confesses. He loves Tamar, his brother Absalom's sister. The admission hangs between them, thick with implications. Jonadab proposes a plan. Pretend to be ill. When David visits, ask him to send Tamar to make food for you. She'll come to your chambers. She'll be alone. The rest goes unspoken but understood. Amnon lies down. He feigns sickness. David comes to check on his son. The trap springs exactly as planned. "Let my sister Tamar come and make some bread in my sight, that I may eat from her hand." David sends her. The king unknowingly delivers his daughter to his son's lust. The father who failed to control his own desires doesn't recognize danger in his son's request. Tamar comes. She kneads dough in Amnon's chambers. She bakes the bread. She brings it to him. But Amnon refuses to eat. He sends everyone else away. Only Tamar remains. "Bring the food into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand." She enters. He grabs her. The assault begins. "Come to bed with me, my sister." Tamar fights with words since physical resistance is futile. "No, my brother, don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing. What about me? Where could I get rid of my disgrace? What about you? You would be like one of the wicked fools in Israel. She offers an alternative. Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from you. Whether she believes this or simply tries to delay, Scripture doesn't say. Desperation breeds any argument that might stop what's coming. Amnon doesn't listen. He's stronger than her. He violates her. He commits the act that destroys them both. Then something terrible happens. The desire that consumed him transforms instantly to hatred. The obsession that made him sick becomes revulsion. He hates her with intensity greater than the love he claimed. Get up and get out. Tamar understands. No, sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you've already done to me. The ancient world's brutal mathematics. A violated virgin has one path to legitimacy, marriage to her violator. Exile compounds the crime. It announces her shame while denying her any remedy. Amnon doesn't care. He calls his servant. Get this woman out of my sight and bolt the door after her. She's wearing a richly ornamented robe, the garment virgin daughters of the king wear, the symbol of her status. The servant throws her out. The door bolts. Tamar tears the robe. She puts ashes on her head. She puts her hands on her head. She walks away, weeping aloud. Her brother Absalom finds her. He reads the situation immediately. Has that Amnon been with you? Be quiet now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart. The words sound like comfort. They function as containment. Absalom already plans vengeance. But vengeance requires patience. Public scandal would complicate everything. Better to wait. Better to plan. Tamar lives in Absalom's house, desolate. David hears about it. Fury rises in him, but he does nothing. The king who condemned a rich man for taking a poor man's lamb takes no action when his son violates his daughter. The father who danced before God's ark won't discipline the son who defiled his sister. Some manuscripts add a reason. David loves Amnon because he's his firstborn, the heir apparent, the next king. How can David punish him severely without destabilizing the succession? But maybe the real reason sits deeper. Maybe David remembers Bathsheba. Maybe he feels the hypocrisy of judging his son for lust when his own lust sent a man to death. Maybe the father's sin paralyzes his response to the son's. Whatever the reason, David's inaction seals Amnon's fate. The king won't bring justice, so the brother will. Absalom says nothing to Amnon, neither good nor bad. He speaks to him not at all. The silence stretches. Days become weeks. Weeks become months. 2 years pass. Absalom owns sheep in Baal Hazor, near the border of Ephraim. Shearing time comes, a celebration. Absalom invites all the king's sons. He goes to David. Your servant has shearers. Will the king and his attendants please come? David declines. Too many people would be a burden. Absalom presses. If not, please let my brother Amnon come with us. David hesitates. Why should he go with you? Absalom pushes harder. Finally, David consents. Amnon and all the other sons will attend. Absalom speaks to his servants. Clear instructions, simple and brutal. Watch for when Amnon is in high spirits from drinking wine. When I say, strike Amnon down, then act. Don't be afraid. Haven't I given you this order? Be strong and brave. The feast begins. Wine flows. Celebration masks murder. Amnon drinks, unaware. High spirits, no suspicion. Absalom gives the signal. The servants strike. The crown prince falls. The heir to David's throne dies at his brother's command. Panic explodes. The other sons scramble for their mules. They flee in terror. The party becomes chaos, blood and screaming and desperate escape. Word reaches Jerusalem before the princes do. The first report gets the details wrong, but the horror right. Absalom has struck down all the king's sons. Not one is left. David tears his clothes. He throws himself on the ground. All his attendants stand by with torn clothes. The king mourns his sons. All of them. Dead. Amnon's sin and Absalom's vengeance have consumed them all. Jonadab speaks up, the same Jonadab who gave Amnon the plan that led to Tamar's rape. My lord should not think that they killed all the princes, so only Amnon is dead. This has been Absalom's express intention ever since the day Amnon violated his sister Tamar. The other sons appear on the road. The king's servants see them. Jonadab's words prove true. They arrive weeping. David and his servants weep with them. Amnon alone has died, but Absalom has fled. He runs to Talmai, son of Ammihud, king of Geshur, David's former father-in-law, Absalom's maternal grandfather. Political asylum in a friendly foreign court. David mourns his son every day. Absalom stays in Geshur 3 years. The king's spirit longs to go to Absalom. Grief for Amnon gives way to grief for Absalom's absence. Tamar remains in Absalom's house, desolate and forgotten by the narrative. Her voice never returns, her pain never resolves. She becomes a catalyst for violence between men while her own trauma disappears from view. 3 lives destroyed, Tamar violated and exiled to silence, Amnon murdered at a feast. Absalom transformed from brother to fugitive. David's house begins tearing itself apart exactly as Nathan promised. The sword will never depart from your house. The prophecy unfolds. What David did in secret now happens in daylight. The father's sin with Bathsheba echoes in the son's sin with Tamar. The father's arrangement of Uriah's death echoes in the son's arrangement of Amnon's death. But David's paralysis makes it worse. A king must bring justice. A father must protect his children. David fails at both. His inaction when Tamar is violated enables Absalom's vengeance. His silence after Amnon's crime creates the conditions for Amnon's murder. The man who showed such clear moral vision when Nathan told a story about sheep cannot see clearly when his own children need him. The king who judged the rich man instantly cannot judge his own sons at all. 3 years pass. Absalom remains in exile. David's longing grows. But the king makes no move to bring his son home. The gap between wanting and acting defines this phase of David's life. He wanted to discipline Amnon, but didn't. He wants Absalom back, but won't send for him. The consequences Nathan announced continue unfolding. Disaster rises from David's own family. The sword devours his sons. What he sowed in secret, he reaps in public view. But the worst is yet to come. Absalom's exile won't last. His return will bring something more dangerous than his absence. The brother who killed for Tamar's honor will betray his father for a crown. The rape of Tamar sets everything in motion. Violence begets violence. Sin produces sin. The cycle Nathan predicted spins faster. David's house tears itself apart. The dynasty promised eternal endurance experiences internal civil war. The throne God said would never end faces assault from the king's own seed. Tamar sits desolate in Absalom's house. Amnon lies dead at Baal-Hazor. Absalom hides in Geshur. David mourns in Jerusalem. The golden age is over. The darkness spreads. The family collapses under the weight of unpunished sin and unmeasured vengeance. And in Geshur, Absalom waits. 3 years of exile. 3 years of planning. 3 years of growing ambition. The brother who killed for honor will soon reach for power. The son who fled will return. The heir who was third in line will make his move. David mourns for Amnon. David longs for Absalom, but David doesn't see what's coming. The sword hasn't finished with his house. The consequences haven't ended. The price continues rising. The rape of Tamar was just the beginning. The Absalom rebellion, Joab notices the king's longing. David's spirit reaches toward Absalom across the miles. 3 years of exile haven't diminished the father's desire for the son, but something holds David back. Justice? Principle? Fear of appearing weak? Joab doesn't know and doesn't care. The commander acts. He finds a wise woman from Tekoa. He puts words in her mouth. He sends her to the king with a fabricated story designed to trap David into bringing Absalom home. She comes before David in mourning clothes. She tells her tale. 2 sons, a fight. One struck the other dead. Now the whole clan demands the survivor's life. Blood for blood. But if they execute him, her husband's name and lineage end. David promises protection. The woman pushes further. She gets the king to swear an oath. Then she springs the trap. Why have you devised something like this against the people of God? The king convicts himself, for he has not brought back his banished son. David sees through it. Is the hand of Joab with you in all this? The woman admits everything. David calls Joab, "Go, bring back the young man Absalom." Joab falls with his face to the ground. He blesses the king. He goes to Geshur. He brings Absalom home to Jerusalem. But David adds a condition. He must go to his own house. He must not see my face. Absalom returns, but he's banished from his father's presence. The exile continues inside Jerusalem's walls. 2 years pass this way. Living in the capital, forbidden from the palace, close to power, denied access. Absalom sends for Joab twice to ask him to intercede with David. Joab refuses to come. Absalom's response shows his character. He tells his servants to set Joab's barley field on fire. The field burns. Joab comes immediately. "Why did your servant set my field on fire?" Absalom's answer drips with entitlement. "I sent for you to come here so I could send you to the king to ask why he brought me back from Geshur. It would have been better for me to stay there. Now let me see the king's face." If I'm guilty, let him execute me. Joab goes to David. He delivers the message. David finally relents. He summons Absalom. The son comes before the father. He bows down with his face to the ground. David kisses him. The reconciliation looks complete. But something's broken that kissing can't fix. Absalom harbors ambitions that forgiveness can't satisfy. The years of exile planted seeds David doesn't see growing. Absalom begins his campaign subtly. He acquires a chariot and horses. He gets 50 men to run ahead of him. The display of royal pretension in a kingdom where the king himself lives simply. The image matters. The appearance of power attracts power. He rises early. He stations himself beside the road leading to the city gate. Anyone coming to bring a case to the king, Absalom intercepts. What town are you from? Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel. Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there is no representative of the king to hear you. Then the poison. If only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint could come to me and I would see they receive justice. When people bow to him, he reaches out his hand. He takes hold of them. He kisses them. The common touch. The man of the people. The prince who cares while the king grows distant. The campaign runs for 4 years. Systematic, patient, brilliant. Absalom steals the hearts of the men of Israel while his father sleeps unaware in Jerusalem. Then Absalom makes his move. Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While living at Jeshurun in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron. David grants permission. Go in peace. Absalom travels to Hebron, the city where David was first crowned king. The symbolic location isn't accidental. Absalom sends secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel. As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, Absalom is king in Hebron. 200 men from Jerusalem accompany Absalom. They go unsuspecting, knowing nothing about the plot. But their presence gives the rebellion legitimacy. Notable men from the capital appear to support the coup. Absalom sends friends for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's the wisest advisor in Israel, the man whose counsel is like inquiring of God himself. Ahithophel joins the conspiracy. The revolt gains strength rapidly. Momentum builds. Support swells. What started as one man's ambition becomes a movement. A messenger reaches David. The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. The king's response is immediate flight. No debate, no military council, no attempt to rally loyal forces in Jerusalem. Just panic. We must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin on us and put the city to the sword. David abandons his capital. The king who conquered Jerusalem now flees from it. He leaves with his household. He leaves 10 concubines behind to take care of the palace. The detail will matter later. The whole household follows him. They halt at the edge of the city. The army passes by the Kerethites, the Pelethites, 600 Gittites, who came with David from Gath. The king speaks to Ittai the Gittite. Why should you come with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You're a foreigner, an exile. Should you wander with us when I don't know where I'm going? Take your men and go. Ittai's answer echoes Ruth's covenant with Naomi. As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, wherever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be. Loyalty in the moment of abandonment. Foreigners who stay when Israelites rebel. The pattern of David's life continues. Those he doesn't expect prove faithful. Those he should trust betray him. The procession climbs the Mount of Olives. David goes up weeping. His head is covered. He's barefoot. All the people with him cover their heads too. They weep as they go. Someone tells David that Ahithophel is among the conspirators. The news devastates him. Lord, turn Ahithophel's counsel into foolishness. At the summit where people worship God, Hushai the Archite meets David. His robe is torn, dust on his head. David sends him back to Jerusalem. If you go with me, you'll be a burden. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, your majesty. I was your father's servant in the past, but now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. Hushai returns. He arrives just as Absalom enters Jerusalem. The spy plants himself in the rebel court. The flight continues. Just past the summit, Ziba meets them. He's Mephibosheth's steward, bringing donkeys loaded with provisions. David asks where Mephibosheth is. He's staying in Jerusalem. He thinks, "Today the Israelites will restore to me my grandfather's kingdom." David believes the lie instantly. All that belonged to Mephibosheth is now yours. The king's judgment fails him in crisis. The man who once showed such loyalty to Jonathan's son now disinherits him on a servant's word. At Bahurim, a man named Shimei comes out. He's from Saul's clan. He curses David. He pelts him with stones. He throws dirt. "Get out! Get out, you murderer! You scoundrel! The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in Saul's household. The Lord has given the kingdom to your son Absalom. You've come to ruin because you're a murderer." Abishai wants to silence him. "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut off his head." David refuses. If he's cursing because the Lord said to him, "Curse David," who can ask, "Why do you do this?" My son, my own flesh and blood, is trying to end my life. How much more this Benjamite? Leave him alone. Let him curse. The Lord has told him to. Maybe the Lord will see my distress and repay me with good for the cursing I'm receiving today. The fugitive king accepts insult as possible judgment. The shepherd who ran from Saul now runs from his own son. The man who spared Saul twice accepts cursing from Saul's relative. Grace extends even in humiliation. The procession continues. Shimei keeps pace, cursing and throwing stones and dirt. The king who entered Jerusalem in triumph leaves in shame. David and his people arrive at their destination, exhausted. They refresh themselves while Absalom enters Jerusalem with Ahithophel. Hushai approaches Absalom. "Long live the king! Long live the king!" Absalom questions him. "Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why didn't you go with him?" Hushai's answer is perfect. "The one chosen by the Lord, by these people, and by all the men of Israel, his I will be, and with him I'll remain. Furthermore, whom should I serve? Should I not serve the son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you." Absalom accepts it. The spy embeds himself successfully. Absalom turns to Ahithophel. "Give us your advice. What should we do?" Ahithophel's counsel is calculated to make reconciliation impossible. Sleep with your father's concubines, whom he left to take care of the palace. Then all Israel will hear that you've made yourself obnoxious to your father, and the hands of everyone with you will be strengthened. They pitch a tent on the palace roof, the same roof where David saw Bathsheba. Absalom goes in to his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. What David did in secret, his son does in public. Nathan's prophecy fulfills itself precisely. The consequences continue unfolding exactly as promised. Ahithophel speaks again. "Let me choose 12,000 men and pursue David tonight. I'll attack while he's weary and weak. I'll strike him with terror, and all the people with him will flee. I'll strike down only the king and bring all the people back to you. The death of the man you seek will mean the return of all. All the people will be unharmed." The plan is brilliant. David's forces are tired from fleeing, they're disorganized, they're vulnerable. A quick strike ends the rebellion before it becomes a civil war. The plan seems good to Absalom and all the elders of Israel. But Absalom makes a fatal mistake. "Summon Hushai the Archite. Let's hear what he has to say." Hushai comes. Absalom explains Ahithophel's plan. "Should we do what he says? If not, give us your opinion." Hushai knows Ahithophel's advice is sound. He knows it would work. Therefore, he must convince Absalom it won't. The advice Ahithophel has given is not good this time. You know your father and his men. They're fighters and fierce as a wild bear robbed of her cubs. Your father is an experienced fighter. He won't spend the night with the troops. Even now, he's hidden in a cave or some other place. If he attacks your troops first, whoever hears about it will say, "There's been a slaughter among the troops who follow Absalom." Then even the bravest soldier, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt with fear. The flattery works. The fear spreads. Hushai continues, "I advise you, let all Israel from Dan to Beersheba, as numerous as the sand on the seashore, be gathered to you, with you yourself leading them into battle. Then we'll attack David wherever he's found, and will fall on him as dew settles on the ground. Neither he nor any of his men will be left alive. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city and will drag it down to the valley until not even a pebble is left." Absalom and all the men of Israel say, "The advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel." The Lord has determined to frustrate Ahithophel's good advice in order to bring disaster on Absalom. David's prayer on the Mount of Olives receives its answer. divine intervention through human counsel. Hushai sends word through Zadok and Abiathar, the priests. Their sons, Jonathan and Ahimaaz, carry the message to David. Cross the Jordan immediately. Don't spend the night at the fords in the wilderness. Cross over without fail, or the king and all the people with him will be swallowed up. The messengers hide in a well at Bahurim when Absalom's servants search for them. A woman covers the well opening with a cloth and scatters grain over it. The servants find nothing. The message gets through. David receives the warning. He and all his people cross the Jordan. By daybreak, not one is left who hasn't crossed. Ahithophel sees his advice wasn't followed. He knows what it means. The rebellion will fail. Absalom will die. Everyone associated with the conspiracy will face David's justice. He saddles his donkey. He goes to his house in his hometown. He puts his house in order. He hangs himself. The wisest counselor in Israel chooses death over defeat. His suicide confirms his assessment. Absalom's cause is lost. The delay Hushai created will cost everything. David reaches Mahanaim. Absalom and all the men of Israel cross the Jordan. The battle lines form. The civil war begins. Shobi, Machir, and Barzillai bring supplies to David. Bedding and bowls and pottery, wheat and barley, flour and roasted grain, beans and lentils, honey and curds, sheep and cheese. The fugitive king receives provision from loyal subjects while his son's army approaches. David organizes his troops. He divides them into 3 groups under Joab, Abishai, and Ittai. He announces his intention to march out with them. The troops protest. You must not go out. If we flee, they won't care about us. Even if half of us die, they won't care. But you're worth 10,000 of us. It would be better now for you to give us support from the city. David agrees. He stands beside the gate as the army marches out. The whole army hears him give the order to his commanders. Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake. The father's love persists through rebellion. The king wants victory, but not at the cost of his son's life. The command is public, specific, impossible to misunderstand. The army marches out to meet Israel in the field. The battle takes place in the forest of Ephraim. David's forces defeat the army of Israel, 20,000 casualties in a single day. The forest claims more victims than the sword. The terrain becomes Israel's enemy. Absalom encounters David's men. He's riding his mule. The mule goes under the thick branches of a large oak. Absalom's head gets caught in the tree. He's left hanging between heaven and earth while the mule he was riding keeps going. A man sees it. He reports to Joab, I just saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree. Joab's response crackles with contempt. What? You saw him? Why didn't you strike him to the ground? I would have had to give you 10 shekels of silver and a warrior's belt. The man refuses the implied rebuke. Even if 1,000 shekels were weighed out into my hands, I wouldn't lay a hand on the king's son. In our hearing, the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, protect the young man Absalom for my sake. If I had betrayed him, and nothing is hidden from the king, you yourself would have kept your distance from me. The soldier knows David. The soldier knows Joab. He won't become a scapegoat for executing the king's beloved son. Joab takes 3 javelins. He goes to where Absalom hangs alive in the oak. He plunges them into Absalom's heart. 10 armor-bearers surround Absalom. They strike him and finish him off. Joab sounds the trumpet. The troops stop pursuing Israel. The battle ends. They take Absalom's body. They throw it into a big pit in the forest. They pile a large heap of rocks over it. All the Israelites flee to their homes. The rebellion collapses with Absalom's death. During his lifetime, Absalom erected a pillar in the king's valley. I have no son to carry on the memory of my name. He named the pillar after himself. It's called Absalom's monument to this day. The irony is savage. The man who grasped for a crown leaves only a monument to himself. The son who rebelled to secure his legacy dies without an heir. The heir who couldn't wait for his inheritance loses everything. Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, wants to run with the news. Joab refuses. You're not the one to take the news today. You may do it another time, but not today, because the king's son is dead. Joab sends a Cushite instead. The foreign runner delivers the news that will break the king's heart. But Ahimaaz persists. He runs by way of the plain. He outruns the Cushite. The watchman sees him coming. He recognizes his running. David waits at the gate between the inner and outer defenses. The watchman calls down, "A man running alone." David interprets it. If he's alone, he must have good news. The runner approaches. Another runner appears behind him. The watchman announces both. David speaks. The first one is Ahimaaz. He's a good man. He comes with good news. Ahimaaz calls out, "All is well." He bows before David. "Praise be to the Lord your God. He has delivered up those who lifted their hands against my lord the king." David asks the only question that matters to him. Is the young man Absalom safe? Ahimaaz evades. "I saw great confusion just as Joab was about to send the king's servant and me, your servant, but I don't know what it was." David tells him to stand aside. The Cushite arrives. He delivers his message. "My lord the king, hear the good news. The Lord has vindicated you today by delivering you from the hand of all who rose up against you." David asks again, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" The Cushite answers, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise up to harm you be like that young man." The words land. David understands. His son is dead. The rebellion succeeded only in destroying the rebel. Absalom hung in an oak, pierced by javelins because he reached too far too soon. The king is shaken. He goes up to the room over the gateway. He weeps as he goes. His cry echoes across the centuries. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." Victory tastes like ashes. The kingdom is saved. The dynasty is secure. The throne remains David's, but the cost breaks him. The father's heart shatters. The king who ordered Absalom spared weeps for the son Joab wouldn't spare. The sword continues its work in David's house. The consequences continue. Nathan's prophecy marches on, but in the room over the gateway, a father mourns his son. The complexity of grief fills the space. Absalom betrayed him. Absalom would have taken his throne. Absalom slept with his concubines. Absalom deserved death by any measure. David mourns him anyway. The empire stands, the rebellion fails, the king survives, but something in David dies with Absalom in the forest of Ephraim. The shepherd who faced Goliath, the fugitive who spared Saul, the king who conquered nations, the father who loved his son too much. Oh, my son, Absalom. The cry fades but never ends. Exile and civil war. Joab hears the sound. The king's weeping carries through the city. The victory celebration dies before it begins. The army returns from battle to find their commander mourning the enemy. The troops who risk their lives feel the sting of rejection. Word spreads quickly. The king is grieving for his son. The soldiers who fought for David slink into the city like men ashamed, like troops who fled from battle instead of winning it. No triumph, no honor, just silence and confusion. Joab has had enough. He goes straight to the king. No diplomatic approach, no gentle words. The commander speaks with brutal honesty. "Today you have humiliated all your men who saved your life and the lives of your sons and daughters and the lives of your wives and concubines. You love those who hate you and hate those who love you. You've made it clear today that the commanders and men mean nothing to you. I see that you'd be pleased if Absalom were alive today and all of us were dead." The words cut like blades. But Joab isn't finished. "Now go out and encourage your men. I swear by the Lord that if you don't go out, not a man will be left with you by nightfall. This will be worse for you than all the calamities that have come on you from your youth till now." The threat is real. David's grief, however genuine, threatens to alienate the very people who kept him alive. A king who mourns his enemies more than he honors his defenders won't remain king long. David rises. He takes his seat in the gateway. The word spreads. The troops come before the king. The appearance of normalcy returns, but something has shifted. Joab's rebuke reveals what everyone knows. David's authority rests on the army's loyalty. Without them, he's just another fugitive. Meanwhile, throughout Israel, the tribes argue among themselves. The rebellion collapsed with Absalom's death, but the question remains, what now? The king delivered us from our enemies. He rescued us from the Philistines, but now he's fled from Absalom, and Absalom, whom we anointed to rule over us, has died in battle. So why do you say nothing about bringing the king back? David hears about the discussions. He sends word to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. "Ask the elders of Judah, why should you be the last to bring the king back to his palace? You are my relatives, my own flesh and blood, so why should you be last to bring back the king?" Then David makes a calculated political move. He sends a message to Amasa, Absalom's commander. "Aren't you my own flesh and blood? May God deal with me severely if you don't become my commander of the army in place of Joab." The message serves multiple purposes. It reaches out to those who followed Absalom. It offers reconciliation over retribution, and it punishes Joab for executing Absalom against explicit orders. The strategy works. Amasa wins over the hearts of the men of Judah. They send word to David, "Return, you and all your men." David heads back. He comes to the Jordan. Judah comes to Gilgal to meet him and bring him across. Shimei, son of Gera, hurries down with the men of Judah. The same Shimei who cursed David and threw stones during the retreat. He brings 1,000 Benjamites with him. Ziba, Saul's steward, rushes down with his 15 sons and 20 servants. They wade into the Jordan to help the king's household cross. Shimei crosses and falls before David. "May my lord not hold me guilty. Don't remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord the king left Jerusalem. May the king put it out of his mind. Your servant knows he has sinned. But today I have come as the first from the tribes of Joseph to come down and meet my lord the king." Abishai speaks up. "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this? He cursed the Lord's anointed." David silences him. "What does this have to do with you, sons of Zeruiah? This day you've become my adversaries. Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Don't I know that today I am king over Israel?" He turns to Shimei. "You shall not die." The king gives his oath. Mephibosheth, Saul's grandson, comes down to meet the king. He hasn't taken care of his feet or trimmed his mustache or washed his clothes from the day the king left until the day he returned safely. David questions him. "Why didn't you go with me, Mephibosheth?" Mephibosheth explains. "My lord the king, since I, your servant, am lame, I said, I'll have my donkey saddled and will ride on it so I can go with the king. But Ziba, my servant, betrayed me. He slandered your servant to my lord the king. My lord the king is like an angel of God. Do whatever you wish. All my grandfather's descendants deserved nothing but death from my lord the king. But you gave your servant a place among those who eat at your table. What right do I have to make any more appeals to the king?" David's response reveals his weariness. "Why say more? I order you and Ziba to divide the land." Mephibosheth answers with dignity. "Let him take everything now that my lord the king has returned home safely." The crossing continues. Barzillai the Gileadite comes down from Rogelim. He's 80 years old. He provided for the king during his stay in Mahanaim. Wealthy, generous, loyal. David speaks to him. "Cross over with me and stay with me in Jerusalem. I'll provide for you." Barzillai declines with grace. "How many more years will I live that I should go up to Jerusalem with the king? I'm now 80 years old. Can I tell the difference between what is enjoyable and what is not? Can your servant taste what he eats and drinks? Can I still hear the voices of male and female singers? Why should your servant be an added burden to my lord the king?" The old man's wisdom shines through. He knows his limitations. He knows his time is short. He wants to die in his own town, near his father and mother's tomb. "But here is your servant Kimham. Let him cross over with my lord the king. Do for him whatever you wish." David agrees. "Kimham shall cross over with me, and I'll do for him whatever you wish. And anything you desire from me, I'll do for you." The people cross the Jordan. The king crosses. David kisses Barzillai and gives him his blessing. Barzillai returns home. David continues to Gilgal with Kimham. The army of Judah escorts the king. Half the men of Israel accompany him, but tension simmers beneath the surface. The men of Israel confront David. "Why did our brothers, the men of Judah, steal the king away and bring him and his household across the Jordan together with all his men?" The men of Judah answer, "We did this because the king is closely related to us. Why are you angry about it? Have we eaten any of the king's provisions? Have we taken anything for ourselves?" The men of Israel counter, "We have 10 shares in the king. We have a greater claim on David than you have. So why do you treat us with contempt? Weren't we the first to speak of bringing back our king?" But the men of Judah's response is even fiercer than the men of Israel's. The argument escalates. The unity that brought David back fractures immediately. A troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bichri, a Benjamite, sounds the trumpet. He shouts, "We have no share in David. We have no inheritance in Jesse's son. Every man to his tent, Israel." The men of Israel desert David. They follow Sheba, son of Bichri. But the men of Judah stay with their king all the way from the Jordan to Jerusalem. David arrives at his palace. He takes the 10 concubines he left to care for the palace, the ones Absalom violated. He puts them in a house under guard. He provides for them, but doesn't sleep with them. They live in confinement like widows until they die. The stain of Absalom's public sin lingers. The women become casualties of their king's failure and his son's rebellion. Alive but imprisoned, provided for but abandoned, neither wives nor widows, forgotten. David turns to Amasa. Summon the men of Judah to come to me within 3 days. You be here yourself. Amasa goes to summon Judah, but he takes longer than the time David set. The delay worries David. Sheba's rebellion could spread while Amasa mobilizes troops. David speaks to Abishai. Now Sheba son of Bichri will do us more harm than Absalom did. Take your master's men and pursue him, or he'll find fortified cities and escape from us. Joab's men march out under Abishai's command. Joab goes with them. They march to pursue Sheba. At the great rock in Gibeon, Amasa comes to meet them. Joab is wearing his military tunic with a belt and a dagger strapped to his waist. As he steps forward, the dagger falls out. Joab greets Amasa. How are you, my brother? He takes Amasa by the beard with his right hand to kiss him. Amasa isn't on guard against the dagger in Joab's hand. Joab plunges it into his belly. Amasa's intestines spill out. He dies without Joab striking twice. The assassination is efficient, brutal, political. Amasa threatened Joab's position. David had promised Amasa the command Joab held. So Joab eliminates him the same way he eliminated Abner years ago. The pattern repeats. Anyone who threatens Joab's power dies by Joab's hand. Joab and Abishai pursue Sheba. One of Joab's men stands over Amasa's body. Whoever favors Joab and whoever is for David, let him follow Joab. Amasa lies wallowing in his blood in the middle of the road. The man sees that all the troops come to a halt there. He drags the body from the road into a field and throws a garment over it. After the body is removed, everyone continues following Joab. They pursue Sheba through all the tribes of Israel. He passes through Abel, Beth-Maachah, and through the entire region of the Bichrites. They all gather and follow him. Joab's forces arrive. They besiege Abel Beth-Maachah. They build a siege ramp up to the city. It stands against the outer fortifications. They begin battering the wall to bring it down. A wise woman calls from the city. Listen, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him. Joab approaches. The woman asks, Are you Joab? I am. Listen to what your servant has to say. I'm listening, she continues. Long ago they used to say, Get your answer at Abel, and that settled it. We are the peaceful and faithful in Israel. You're trying to destroy a city that is a mother in Israel. Why do you want to swallow up the Lord's inheritance? Joab answers quickly. Far be it from me. Far be it from me to swallow up or destroy. That's not the case. A man named Sheba, son of Bichri from the hill country of Ephraim, has lifted up his hand against the king, against David. Hand over this one man, and I'll withdraw from the city. The woman replies, His head will be thrown to you from the wall. She goes to all the people with her wise advice. They cut off the head of Sheba, son of Bichri. They throw it out to Joab. He sounds the trumpet. His men disperse from the city, each returning home. Joab goes back to the king in Jerusalem. The rebellion ends with a severed head tossed over a wall. Practical, efficient, brutal. The city saves itself by sacrificing the troublemaker. Justice or expedience, the outcome is the same. Joab remains commander of Israel's entire army despite murdering Amasa. David's attempt to replace him failed. The king lacks either the power or the will to punish Joab. The commander who kills anyone threatening his position stands untouchable. The civil war ends, the kingdom stabilizes, but the scars remain. The split between Israel and Judah that emerged during the argument at the Jordan will resurface. The seeds of the kingdom's eventual division are planted. David returns to Jerusalem, the throne is secure, the army is intact, the borders hold, but the price keeps rising. Absalom dead, Amasa dead, Sheba dead. The concubines imprisoned, the nation fractured along tribal lines. The consequences, Nathan announced, continue. The sword hasn't finished with David's house. Disaster rose from his own family, more waits ahead, but the worst of the rebellions has passed. The king who fled Jerusalem now rules from it again. The fugitive returned, the exile ended, the shepherd sits on his throne, but Joab walks free. The man who defied direct orders, the man who murders rivals with impunity, the man David needs but cannot control. The empire holds together through violence and wise women negotiating over city walls. through severed heads and political maneuvering, through tribal tensions barely suppressed. David's kingdom survives, but it survives scarred, fractured, held together by force and fear as much as by loyalty. The golden age feels distant now. The shepherd king who danced before the ark seems like a different person. The man who mourns his rebel son while his loyal general murders his replacement commander bears little resemblance to the youth who played music for Saul. The crossing back over the Jordan marks a return. But return to what? A palace with imprisoned concubines, a capital recently controlled by a rebel son, a kingdom divided in loyalty, an army commanded by a man who kills anyone the king tries to promote above him. Victory tastes bitter. Peace comes through bloodshed. Unity requires suppressing division. The throne David sits on is secure, but it rests on foundations that keep cracking. Joab blows the trumpet, the siege ends, the troops disperse, everyone goes home. But home isn't what it was for the concubines, for the tribes, for the king himself. The sword continues its work. The prophecy marches on. The consequences compound. David rules, but he rules a kingdom that almost rejected him, a nation that split and barely reunited, a house stained with blood and betrayal. The return is complete. The exile is over. The king sits in Jerusalem. But something broke that crossing back over the Jordan couldn't fix. Something died with Absalom in the forest that Sheba's execution couldn't restore. The shepherd is home. But home feels different now. Darker. Heavier. Haunted by what happened and what's still to come. The civil war ends. The consequences don't. "O my son Absalom." The room above the gateway holds only grief. David's cry echoes through empty space. "Oh, my son Absalom, my son Absalom. If only I had died instead of you. Oh, Absalom, my son, my son." The words repeat. Again and again, the father's anguish pours out in waves. Victory means nothing. The kingdom means nothing. The throne means nothing. His son is dead. Outside, the army that fought for him waits. Inside, the king who should be celebrating collapses under sorrow. The victory they won feels like defeat. The rebel they destroyed was his beloved son. Joab's rebuke still rings in David's ears. The commander was right. The troops risked everything. They deserve honor, they deserve gratitude, they deserve their king's attention. But David can only think of Absalom. The beautiful son, the ambitious son, the son who stole hearts and launched rebellions, the son who violated his concubines and would have taken his throne, the son he loved anyway. The complexity of the grief cuts deeper than simple sorrow. David mourns the man Absalom became. He mourns the relationship they never had. He mourns his own failures as a father. He mourns the boy who grew up while he was building an empire. Tamar's rape, David did nothing. Amnon's murder, David did nothing. Absalom's exile, David brought him back, but kept him at a distance. 2 years in Jerusalem without seeing his father's face. The resentment that produced must have fed Absalom's ambition. What if David had acted when Tamar was violated? What if he had brought justice instead of paralysis? What if he had truly reconciled with Absalom instead of the hollow gesture at the gate? The questions have no answers. The past can't be changed. The son can't be brought back. The consequences of choices made, the son died while the father waited for news. The irony crushes David. He gave explicit orders, "Be gentle with the young man Absalom for my sake." Everyone heard. The whole army knew. But Joab ignored the command, just as he ignored David's previous attempts to replace him. Joab's defiance saved the kingdom. If Absalom had lived, the rebellion would have continued. Mercy toward the rebel leader would have encouraged others. The war would have dragged on. More would have died. But Joab's defiance destroyed David's son. The commander chose the kingdom over the king's explicit wish. He executed the rebel and saved the throne. He gave David victory and took his son. David understands the logic. He knows Joab was right strategically. He knows Absalom alive meant continued war. He knows the kingdom needed this outcome. He grieves anyway. Logic doesn't comfort a father's heart. Strategy doesn't ease a parent's pain. The kingdom survives, but David's son is dead. That fact dwarfs everything else. The weeping continues. The servants outside the room shift uncomfortably. No one knows what to say. No one knows what to do. Their king mourns his enemy. Their commander grieves the man who tried to take his crown. Hours pass. The sun moves across the sky. The army waits. The city holds its breath. The king remains in the room above the gateway, calling out his son's name. Joab's rebuke finally penetrates the grief. David knows he must act. The troops deserve better. The kingdom requires leadership. Personal sorrow can't paralyze public duty. He rises, he washes his face, he composes himself. He leaves the room, he takes his seat in the gateway. The gesture announces his return to function. The king resumes his role, even as the father continues mourning inside. The troops come before him. Relief shows on their faces. Their king acknowledges them. The victory receives some recognition, however muted. Life moves forward, even though everything feels wrong. But David will never fully recover from this blow. Absalom's death joins the other griefs that accumulate across his reign. Bathsheba's infant, Amnon, now Absalom. The sword keeps working through his house, exactly as Nathan promised. The cry from the room above the gateway will echo through the rest of David's life. "Oh, my son Absalom!" The anguish in those words, the desperation, the helpless love. The father's heart breaking under the weight of consequences he helped create. David failed Tamar. David failed Amnon. David failed Absalom. The pattern is clear. The king who conquered kingdoms couldn't manage his own household. The man who showed such wisdom in leading Israel showed such failure in leading his family. The public success and private catastrophe run parallel through David's life. Empire and dysfunction, victory and grief, glory and shame. The complexity defines him. The contradiction makes him human. Absalom lies buried under rocks in the forest of Ephraim. The monument he erected stands empty. The man who wanted to be remembered leaves only a pile of stones marking where he fell in rebellion. David sits in the gateway, the king who wanted to die for his son, the father who would have traded everything to change the outcome, the man after God's own heart, learning that even a heart aligned with God can break. If only I had died instead of you. The wish is futile, the longing is real, the grief is honest. David doesn't hide it, he doesn't minimize it. He doesn't pretend everything is fine because the kingdom is secure. He mourns publicly, loudly, without shame. The same man who danced before the ark without embarrassment now weeps for his rebel son without apology. Authenticity marks both moments. Joab was right about the troops. Joab was wrong about David's grief. A king can mourn his son even when that son deserved death. A father can weep for a rebel even when that rebel threatened everything. Love doesn't require approval. Grief doesn't require agreement. David's cry from the room above the gateway reveals something profound about human nature and divine grace. People are complex, relationships are messy, love persists even when it shouldn't, and God works through the wreckage of human failure to accomplish divine purposes. Absalom is dead, the rebellion is over, the kingdom survives, the dynasty continues, but in the room above the gateway a father's heart broke, and that breaking matters too. The cry fades, but its echo remains, "Oh, my son Absalom!" In those words lives every parent's worst nightmare. In that anguish dwells every father's deepest fear. In that grief exists the terrible price of love. David descends from the room. He takes his seat. He leads his people. He rules his kingdom. But part of him stays in that room above the gateway, calling out for the son who can't hear him. The shepherd king carries another scar. The fugitive turned emperor adds another grief to his collection. The man after God's own heart learns that alignment with God doesn't protect from heartbreak. He wanted to die instead of Absalom. He lives instead with the knowledge that he couldn't save him, the father's impotence, the king's failure, the man's limitation. "Oh, my son Absalom!" The cry becomes part of David's story. The grief becomes part of his legacy. The loss becomes part of what makes him who he is. The consequences continue. The sword keeps working. The price keeps mounting. But in this moment, in this room, for this father, the only reality is the absence of his son, and the wish, futile but honest, that he could have died in his place. The kingdom-secured peace settles over Israel. Fragile, tested, real. David's return from exile marks a turning point. The great rebellions have passed. Absalom's uprising crushed. Sheba's revolt ended. The kingdom holds together, despite internal tensions. The throne stands secure. But David's troubles aren't over. One final challenge emerges, smaller than Absalom's rebellion, but significant nonetheless. A census, a plague, a threshing floor that will change everything. David speaks to Joab and the army commanders. "Go throughout the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and enroll the fighting men so that I may know how many there are." Joab objects. Unusual for the commander, who usually executes orders without question. May the Lord your God multiply the troops 100 times over. My lord the king, are they not all my lord's subjects? Why does my lord want to do this? Why should he bring guilt on Israel? The objection reveals something. Joab sees what David doesn't. Counting the army suggests reliance on military strength rather than divine provision. It implies trust in numbers instead of God. It smells of pride. But David insists. The king's word overrules the commander's wisdom. Joab and the army commanders leave to count the fighting men of Israel. They go through the entire land. They return to Jerusalem after 9 months and 20 days. Joab reports the numbers. Israel has 800,000 able-bodied men who can handle a sword. Judah has 500,000, 1,300,000 warriors, a massive force, an empire's army. David's conscience strikes him after he counts the troops. The conviction comes too late, but it comes. I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. The pattern repeats. David sins. David repents. Consequences follow anyway. Before David gets up the next morning, the word of the Lord comes to Gad the prophet, David's seer. Go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I am giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you. Gad goes to David. He delivers the message. Shall there come on you 3 years of famine in your land? Or 3 months of fleeing from your enemies while they pursue you? Or 3 days of plague in your land? Now then, think it over and decide how I should answer the one who sent me. 3 terrible options. No escape. Only choice between judgments. The census brought guilt. The guilt demands payment. God offers David the chance to choose how. David's answer shows wisdom even in crisis. I am in deep distress. Let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great, but do not let me fall into human hands. He chooses the plague. 3 days. Better to trust divine mercy than human cruelty. Better to face God directly than through enemy armies. The Lord sends a plague on Israel. It lasts from morning until the appointed time. 70,000 people die. From Dan to Beersheba, the angel of death moves through the land. When the angel stretches out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relents. Enough, withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord stands at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite when the command comes. The place matters. The location will echo through generations. David sees the angel striking down the people. He cries out to the Lord, I have sinned. I, the shepherd, have done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family. The plea reverses his earlier wish. He wanted to die for Absalom, but couldn't. Now he offers to die for his people, and God accepts the substitution of worship instead of life. Gad comes to David that day. Go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. David goes up as the Lord commanded through Gad. Araunah looks and sees the king and his attendants coming toward him. He goes out and bows before David with his face to the ground. Why has my lord the king come to his servant? David answers, to buy your threshing floor so I can build an altar to the Lord that the plague on the people may be stopped. Araunah offers everything freely. Let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your Majesty, Araunah gives all this to the king. But David refuses. No, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. He buys the threshing floor and the oxen. He pays 50 shekels of silver. He builds an altar to the Lord there. He sacrifices burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. The Lord answers his prayer for the land. The plague on Israel stops. The threshing floor becomes sacred ground, the place where plague ended. The place where David paid full price to worship, the place that will become something far greater. This threshing floor will become the site of Solomon's temple, the place where David wanted to build God a house, the location where heaven meets earth for Israel, the spot where sacrifices will be offered for generations, from census to plague to threshing floor to Temple Mount. Divine purpose emerges from human failure. God's plan proceeds despite and through David's sin. The plague reveals David's lingering flaws, even after all the consequences, even after Nathan's confrontation, even after Absalom's rebellion. David still makes choices driven by pride. The census demonstrates that success hasn't cured his capacity for sin. But the plague also reveals David's heart. I have sinned. These are but sheep. What have they done? The shepherd cries out for the flock. The king takes responsibility. The man after God's own heart shows that his heart still turns toward God in repentance. David refuses to offer worship that costs him nothing. The principle matters. Real worship requires real sacrifice. Cheap grace isn't grace. Free offerings aren't offerings. The king pays full price because anything less dishonors God. The kingdom is secure now. The census revealed massive military strength. The plague demonstrated divine power. The threshing floor established the site for worship. Everything is in place for transition. David grows old, his strength fades. The warrior who killed Goliath, the king who conquered nations, the man who danced before the ark. Age catches him, weakness comes, mortality approaches. He can no longer stay warm, even under covers. His servants find Abishag the Shunammite, a young woman of exceptional beauty. She cares for the king. She attends to him. But David has no intimate relations with her. The passion that drove him to Bathsheba has cooled. Age brings different priorities. David begins preparing for what comes next. He can't build the temple because his hands are stained with blood. But he can gather materials. He can make plans. He can prepare his son to finish what he couldn't start. He accumulates bronze in quantities too large to weigh. He gathers iron for nails and fittings. He stockpiles cedar logs from Sidon and Tyre. He collects gold and silver from his conquests. Mountains of materials for a temple he'll never see. He calls Solomon. He explains why he can't build the temple himself. My son, I had it in my heart to build a house for the name of the Lord my God. But this word of the Lord came to me. You have shed much blood and have fought many wars. You are not to build a house for my name, because you have shed much blood on the earth in my sight. The explanation carries no bitterness. David accepts the limitation. He focuses on enabling what he cannot accomplish himself. The next generation will build. This generation will prepare. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace and rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. His name will be Solomon, and I will grant Israel peace and quiet during his reign. He is the one who will build a house for my name. David blesses Solomon. He encourages him. Be strong and courageous and do the work. Don't be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord God, my God, is with you. He will not fail you or forsake you until all the work for the service of the temple of the Lord is finished. The torch passes. The builder equips the one who will build. The warrior prepares the one who will reign in peace. The father sets up the son for success. David organizes the Levites. He divides them into divisions for service in the temple. He assigns the priests to their duties. He establishes the musicians and gatekeepers. The entire worship system takes shape under his direction. He gathers the leaders of Israel. He assembles the officials. He makes Solomon's succession public and certain. The Lord has chosen Solomon, my son, to sit on the throne of the kingdom of the Lord over Israel. He hands Solomon the plans for the temple. All this I have in writing as a result of the Lord's hand on me, and he enabled me to understand all the details of the plan. The specificity matters. The detail demonstrates David's investment. The temple may be Solomon's project, but David's fingerprints will be all over it. His planning, his materials, his organizational structure. Solomon will execute David's vision. David addresses the assembly. He recounts God's choice of him. He explains God's promise regarding Solomon. He describes the materials he's gathered. He announces his personal contributions from his own treasury, beyond what he gathered for the temple. Now, who is willing to consecrate themselves to the Lord today? The leaders respond. They give willingly and generously, gold and silver, bronze and iron, precious stones. The people rejoice at the willing response. David rejoices too. He praises the Lord in the presence of the whole assembly. The prayer flows from a heart that knows both triumph and failure, both glory and shame, both victory and defeat. Yours, Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the majesty and the splendor, for everything in heaven and earth is yours. Yours, Lord, is the kingdom. You are exalted as head over all. The kingdom is secured, the temple is planned, the succession is established, the materials are gathered, everything is ready. David's work is nearly complete. The shepherd's journey from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, from anointing to empire, from outlaw to king, from sinner to repentant, the arc bends toward completion. One final act remains: the formal anointing of Solomon, the public transfer of power, the end of David's reign, and the beginning of the next chapter. But for now, the kingdom stands secure. The borders hold, the enemies fear, the people prosper, the temple awaits construction, the covenant endures. David's legacy takes shape, not just in conquest and empire, not just in psalms and worship, but in preparation for what comes, setting up his son to build what he couldn't, and in using his remaining years to serve purposes beyond himself. The plague is over. The census is forgotten. The threshing floor is purchased. The plans are drawn. The materials are gathered. The kingdom is secure. David rests, the shepherd who became king, the fugitive who became emperor, the sinner who became penitent, the man after God's own heart, who learned that such a heart breaks and heals and breaks again. The consequences of his sins have played out. The sword has done its work in his house. Nathan's prophecy has fulfilled itself. The price has been paid. Now comes the harvest. The dynasty continues. The temple will be built. The promise endures. The line of David stretches forward toward purposes he can barely imagine. The kingdom is secured. The transition begins. The end approaches. But the story doesn't end with David. It continues through Solomon, through the temple, through the dynasty, through the promise. All the way to a son of David born in Bethlehem. All the way to a king who will reign forever. All the way to the fulfillment of every promise made to the shepherd boy with a sling and 5 smooth stones. The kingdom is secure. The legacy is established. The end draws near. The legacy and the line. David summons Solomon one final time. The old king lies in bed, wrapped in blankets that no longer keep him warm. Death approaches. He knows it. The time for final instructions has come. The wisdom of a lifetime must pass to the next generation in the hours that remain. I am about to go the way of all the earth. Be strong. Act like a man. Observe what the Lord your God requires. Walk in obedience to him. Keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations, as written in the law of Moses. The charge echoes across generations. The same charge given to Joshua. The same charge that will be given to kings yet unborn. Obedience to God's law is the foundation of everything. Conquer nations or lose them. Build temples or see them destroyed. Establish dynasties or watch them crumble. Everything depends on faithfulness to the covenant. Do this so that you may prosper in all you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. Davidic covenant, the eternal promise. But David understands what God made clear. The promise is conditional on faithfulness. The dynasty is guaranteed. Individual kings can still fail. The line continues. Specific reigns can still end in disaster. David handles some unfinished business. He reminds Solomon about Joab, about the murders of Abner and Amasa, about bloodshed in peacetime, as if in war. Deal with him according to your wisdom, but do not let his gray head go down to the grave in peace. He mentions Barzillai's sons. Show them kindness, because they stood by me when I fled from your brother, Absalom. He brings up Shimei, the man who cursed him, the man he swore not to execute. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do to him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. The instructions are practical, political, harsh. David protects his son by identifying threats. He honors those who showed loyalty. He finds a way around his own oath regarding Shimei, a dying king securing the kingdom for his heir. Then David rests with his ancestors. He's buried in the city of David. He reigned 40 years, 7 years in Hebron over Judah, 33 in Jerusalem over all Israel. The shepherd's journey ends. The king's rest begins. Solomon sits on his father's throne. The succession proceeds smoothly, but challenges emerge immediately. Adonijah, David's son with Haggith, approaches Bathsheba. He had tried to make himself king before David's death. Solomon spared him. But now Adonijah makes a request that seals his fate. Is your visit peaceful? Yes, peaceful. I have something to say to you. You may say it. You know the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it came to him from the Lord. Now I have one request to make of you. Don't refuse me. Make it. Please ask King Solomon, he won't refuse you. to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. Bathsheba takes the request to Solomon. The king rises to meet her. He bows to her. He has a throne brought for the king's mother. She sits at his right hand. I have one small request to make of you. Don't refuse me. Make it, my mother. I won't refuse you. Let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah. Solomon's response crackles with anger. Why do you request Abishag for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. He is my older brother. He has Abiathar the priest and Joab on his side. The request wasn't innocent. Claiming the king's concubine implies claiming the throne. Adonijah's move is political. Solomon sees it clearly. May God deal with me severely if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. As surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David, and has founded a dynasty for me as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. Benaiah executes the order. Adonijah dies. The last threat to Solomon's throne is eliminated. Solomon deals with Abiathar the priest next. Go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I won't put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David and shared all my father's hardships. Exile instead of execution, mercy mixed with political calculation. The line of Eli ends in Abiathar's removal from priesthood, fulfilling ancient prophecy. Joab hears the news. He fled to the tent of the Lord and took hold of the horns of the altar, seeking sanctuary. The commander who killed with impunity now runs for protection. Solomon sends Benaiah. Go, strike him down. Benaiah enters the tent. The king says, come out. Joab refuses. No, I will die here. Benaiah reports back. Solomon gives the order. Do as he says. Strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my whole family of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. Benaiah goes back. He strikes down Joab at the altar. David's unfinished business with his commander ends. The man who served David his entire reign but defied him repeatedly dies at Solomon's command. Shimei receives house arrest in Jerusalem. Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but don't go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you'll die. 3 years later, Shimei violates the terms. He goes to Gath to retrieve runaway slaves. Solomon hears about it. He summons Shimei. Didn't I make you swear by the Lord and warn you? And didn't you say to me, what you say is good, I will obey? Why then didn't you keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you? Shimei tries to explain. Solomon doesn't care. You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. Benaiah executes him. The kingdom is established firmly in Solomon's hands. David is dead. His enemies are eliminated. His son rules. The dynasty he founded continues. The promise holds. But what is David's legacy? What remains when the shepherd king's story ends? The empire he built will fragment. His grandson will see the kingdom divide. Israel and Judah will become separate nations, often enemies. The united monarchy lasts only through Solomon's reign. The political achievement proves temporary. The military victories endure longer. The borders David established define Israel at its greatest extent. The enemies he subdued stay subdued for generations. The empire's shadow stretches far beyond his lifetime. But David's greatest legacy isn't political or military. It's spiritual and symbolic. The Psalms bear his name, songs of worship, cries of anguish, celebrations of victory, confessions of sin. The shepherd's music becomes Israel's songbook. His words give voice to human emotion across centuries, joy and sorrow, faith and doubt, praise and lament. David's poetry becomes the language of relationship with God. The covenant bears his name, the promise of an eternal dynasty, a king from David's line who will reign forever, the hope that sustains Israel through exile and occupation, the expectation that drives messianic longing. When prophets speak of restoration, they speak of David. When kings are judged, they're measured against David. When the people dream of better days, they remember David's reign as the golden age. The complexity remains. David the conqueror and David the adulterer. David the man after God's own heart, and David the man who took another man's wife. David the father who loved his children, and David the father who failed to discipline them. David the king who brought the ark to Jerusalem, and David the king whose house tore itself apart. The contradiction defines him, the mixture of greatness and failure, the combination of faith and sin, the capacity for both worship and wickedness. David isn't great because he's perfect. David is great because he's real, human, flawed, repentant. The line of David continues beyond Solomon, through Rehoboam, through the divided kingdom, through good kings and evil ones, through exile to Babylon, through return and rebuilding. The dynasty persists even when it doesn't rule. The promise survives even when circumstances deny it. Centuries after David's death, the promise still shapes hope. The prophets still point to a coming king from David's line. Isaiah speaks of a shoot from Jesse's stump. Jeremiah promises a righteous branch. Ezekiel envisions David's descendant as eternal prince. The expectation builds. The longing grows. The hope persists. Somewhere, sometime, a son of David will come who embodies everything the dynasty promised. A king who will reign in righteousness, a ruler who will establish justice, a shepherd who will care for the flock. The genealogies track the line, from David through Solomon, through the kings of Judah, through the exile, through obscurity, through a carpenter named Joseph in a town called Nazareth, through a young woman named Mary who hears impossible news. A son of David will be born in Bethlehem, the same Bethlehem where Samuel anointed the shepherd boy, the same fields where David kept his father's sheep. The circle completes, the promise fulfills, the hope realizes. But that's another story. The story of how a dynasty that started with a shepherd ends with a shepherd, how a kingdom built by the sword finds its true king in the one who refuses the sword. How a line established through conquest reaches its culmination in conquest over death itself. David's legacy isn't ultimately about what he accomplished. It's about what his line produces. The shepherd king matters because of the shepherd king yet to come. The son of Jesse points to the greater son. The man after God's own heart prepares the way for the one who reveals God's heart perfectly. David dies. The man rests. The legend begins. The dynasty continues. The promise endures. The hope persists. From shepherd to king to dynasty, from Bethlehem to Jerusalem to eternity, from anointing to empire to ultimate fulfillment. David's story becomes part of a larger story. His kingdom becomes the shadow of a greater kingdom. His throne becomes the type of an eternal throne. The shepherd boy with 5 smooth stones and a sling, the fugitive hiding in caves, the king dancing before the ark, the father weeping for his son, the man who sinned greatly and repented deeply, the warrior who built an empire and the poet who wrote songs, the complex, contradictory, fully human king whose story refuses simple categories. David's legacy lives in the Psalms sung in worship, in the covenant that shaped hope, in the city that bears his name, in the star that marks his line, in every expectation of a king who will rule with justice and righteousness. The shepherd king rests in the city of David, but his story doesn't end with his death. It continues through his children, through his people, through his promise, through his line, all the way to the one who will be called great, who will be given the throne of his father David, who will reign over the house of Jacob forever, whose kingdom will never end. The entire story of David's kingdom, from shepherd to king to dynasty, from boy to man to legend, from anointing to achievement to eternal significance. The sword departed from his house as Nathan promised, but the covenant remained as God promised. The consequences played out. The dynasty endured. David's story ends, but the story of David's line continues. Through triumph and tragedy, through faithfulness and failure, through exile and return, through occupation and hope, until the day when a son of David is born who fulfills every promise, who embodies every hope, who establishes the kingdom that will never end. The shepherd king sleeps. The shepherd's greater son is yet to come. The legacy endures. The line continues. The promise stands forever.